Wow! Look at this! Oh my God! Look at all these beautiful people!
I just don't want to hear these telling me.
Holy shit! Oh my God, Paulina. Good morning, my darling. Good morning. Siegfried is here. Where's Siegfried? My cousin got an evacuation alert yesterday. Afterwards, another alert to dismiss. I know, Paulina. We all got that. We all got that. Give me coffee. Oh, I missed you so much. Good morning. Yeah, we're safe. Thank you for that. You survived your first full week of work. Pray for Rump. Psalm 109, sections 8 through 19. I know. It was stupid scary. Although we kind of laughed about it afterwards, but we know it's not funny, right? Like, there's people that are so in pain. Neil and Oren. Oh my gosh, it's so nice to see everyone this morning. Sorry I'm late. I had to take Bobo to work. She had an early meeting. You know, those movies, they're not going to make themselves. She had to get down to the glamorous studio to have her glamorous early morning production meeting. So glamorous. Anyway, Clay, good morning. Oren, good morning, darling. Good morning, sister mama. Oh, good morning, Neil. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see everybody. I missed you guys yesterday. Yesterday was fucked up. Lee, getting some provisions. I know. Oops. You have quite a bit of snow coming, don't you? You have a lot of snow coming, right? Oh shit. Oh my God. Come on, stop. Sorry, my fan. It's like I need a little air, but it's cold. It's weird. Anyway, weird day. Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. What we're watching right now is, yeah, I'm getting ready too. Only a few inches, but very cold. Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's the cold that's getting people. Gosh, you know, I hope everybody's okay. I was watching Reed Timmer yesterday. I really enjoy putting Reed Timmer on in the background and having that go kind of as long as he'll go. Yes, butterflies. I hate Trump too. Jane, good morning. Hi, sweetheart. How are you? Welcome. And easily. There you are. There you are. Clay. Clayberg, my ninja. Clayberg. Clayberg's like one of the most amazing Gal Squad members ever. She just does her shit. She doesn't have to, and she's fucking, listen, if she was gonna be out there, like, trolling like a motherfucker, like, she'd kill it. She does it, but she also focuses on the work. And I absolutely love Clayberg so much. I am so lucky to have her as a friend. I hope they spark his ass. Well, it turns out, folks. Turns out, hold on. I gotta wipe my nose. Teresa, good morning, darling. Good morning, love. Miss you, darling, darling. Oh my gosh, I love you guys so much. I do. I love you. Happy Friday. Oh God, that's right. It's Friday. Friday, Friday, Friday. Ooh, it's Friday, Friday, Friday. Ooh. Yeah. So this morning, this is outside of Trump's Mershon trial. You know. So here's my fantasy. Want to hear my fantasy about this? Let me tell you what my fantasy is. What are we watching? Yes. These are people waiting for Trump's sentencing. I love you. We're waiting for Trump's sentencing. So that's what we're waiting for. And here's my fantasy. Wait, let me take you on my fantasy. Let me take you on a magic carpet ride right now. All right, here's my magic carpet ride. It's not real. It's not real. But in my magic carpet ride, what happens today is not only does Mershon show up and, you know, prepare to do his thing, But you've got like Jack Smith, Fonnie Willis, Letitia James. Who else? I don't know. You've all got them, and yeah, exactly. But it becomes kind of a.
I can't see what drops into our.
It then becomes kind of like a group thing where everyone goes around and says, "This is what he did in my case. This is what he did in my case." And Mershon turning around and going, "By the power vested in me by God, I sentence you to a life imprisonment of hard labor." That's the only time I think hard labor should be used, is for these guys. Actually, I think hard labor should only be used for white-collar criminals. What do you think? What do you think? Let's turn those tables. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And then also, wait, we're also going to turn to a SCOTUS case soon.
Hollywood props.
I gotta keep up. We got the SCOTUS case on TikTok. By the power invested in me by Grayskull. Oh, Lisa, what'd you say? Lisa, I'm so sorry. Good morning. Not a regular, but I feel like I've walked into a donut store and folks are sitting around chatting. Have a good day. Lisa, you are a regular, goofy. I know you. Come on now. You're a lounger. Whether you like it or not, you may only come for donuts once in a while. But whenever you come for donuts, there's going to be one waiting for you. Okay? Seriously, Lisa, you, everyone's part of this. So welcome, and anytime you come in and say howdy is great by me. So I'm just happy you're here. Now, what kind of donut can I get you? No. I got fresh maple bars out of the oven or something. I don't know. What do you do with maple bars? I guess they don't go in the oven. Maybe I shouldn't make the donuts. I'm just wondering. Maybe I should stay away from the donuts. It is very sweet what you said. That's right. Powdered blueberry filled donut. Ooh. Holy shit. I don't even think I've heard of that before easily. I don't even think I've heard of that. Is that a thing where you are? I don't think I've heard of a jelly filled. You know what I do love though? I love me a good blueberry donut. Or no, I guess I like blueberry bagels. Sorry, never mind. Scratch that. I'm going to make some blueberry muffins today for tomorrow morning for Bobo breakfast. And that'll be fun. The bakery makes them. Oh, that sounds like pretty, easily with the artisan donut order. Hey, man, we're fancy in this bitch. We are fancy, if nothing else, up in this bitch. I agree with those who believe that last night's SCOTUS decision against Trump on the sentencing was a gimme before SCOTUS rules for Trump for the next 4 years. Well, Neil, I could agree with that somewhat, but I hope they're not making decisions on how many guilty pleas. But in Trump coming to his dead sentencing today, yes, he is, Pauline. He's supposed to be, right? I think he has to. Or wait, doesn't he? Oh, shit. Does he? Does he even have to go? In the description of this video is, it's virtual. Oh, damn. MAGA out there shitting on Barrett. I know. They can't. Who was it yesterday? Someone posted yesterday about Amy Coney Barrett. Hold on, because it was pretty fucking funny. I'm like, oh my God, buyer's remorse? What's the matter? What's the matter, everybody? You don't like what she says? Oh, it was Insurrection Barbie. That's who it was. on Twitter. I was fucking around with Insurrection Barbie. I like to fuck with her sometimes. Let's see. Where shoot. Oh wait, what's this? I didn't see that. Teresa, I just saw the thing you shared with me about someone lighting a fire on purpose. I can't. Is that a shoe? Okay, wait. I'm gonna fuck up if I'm not careful. Okay, so hold on. I'm gonna make sure I find SCOTUS so we don't fuck up.
Your stuff went through.
I wonder if these guys are any good. Who's the best to listen? Who's the best to listen to when it comes to that? Oh God, give me a fucking break. I'm looking. All the chuds are setting up their lives for the inauguration day and all. I'm like, oh my God. The chuds are so excited they don't even know what to do. All right, this is the Washington Post. Let me try that. I don't know if we're gonna watch both. So hold on. Let me just move some shit around here. Oh my God. Baby, baby, baby. Oh, I keep thinking of. Why am I thinking of Justin Bieber? Okay, move over here. Move over here. Move over here. Move over here. And then we're gonna put that there, and then I'm gonna put that here. And then I'm gonna put it. Oh, I see. Hold on. Okay, so this is scotus. And yeah. There's SCOTUS. We're waiting for them to start. Max Flower, I feel like I'm in a conundrum where things where a turd is shitting and I'm very confused. Oh, cat turd also shitting on Barry. Yes. Well, that's his job. I mean, his job is to shit on Democrats. That's really all he does. Ooh, Kung Pao chicken sounds good. I know, I'm really hungry this morning. Probably have to make something to eat. Fun fact, don't want to brag, but you know there's more donut shops per capita than anywhere. What? Wait, where, Jane? Where are there more donut shops per capita? I want to go to that place. Oh, in Canada? But are they all Timmy's? Are you guys like specifically Timmy's, or is your bespoke donut business exploding? Is that it? I know, I'm making everybody hungry. No, not at all. Okay, so it's not just Timmy's. You've got artisanal donuts in Canada. Did you see Trudeau interviewed on Jake Tapout? I hate Jake Tapper. Very articulate, very knowledgeable. Cannot believe some consider Jeff Poliev an improvement. Well, you know what's interesting, Neil? Let me say this, if it helps at all. I don't know. Country style is a biggie. Ooh, that sounds really good, I think. You know what? What was I going to say? You know, the chuds that I watch, and I watch some pretty Canadian chuds, I gotta be honest with you, they don't really like Poliev.
You know, they're all from Riverside.
They don't like anybody. Isn't that weird? Artisanal donuts, Timmy's is like the McDonald's. I know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have made that joke. I shouldn't have made that joke. Of course it is, of course. I love Canada. I don't mean to insult Canada's donut consumption. But what's interesting, okay, so I don't think the chuds in Canada like Polar bear, whatever, the polar bear. I'm going to call him Polar Bear from now on because I don't know. Because you know what the chuds do? They call him Polar Bear. I think it's because they're not French Canadian. They're whatever, English Canadian, I don't know, whatever. Non-French Canadian is. But they don't like him. So what's going to happen? I mean, who's going to be voted in? Because, I guess it doesn't matter. It's the party, right? That's right. It's the party that's voted in. That's so interesting. So you don't, as a voter, you don't get to choose who's the head of the government? Is that true? I have a dumb question. Is that true? I love Canadians except for the chuds because they are Trump. Oh my God, they are such Trump lovers. And I am obviously a very angry person when it comes to Trump lovers. So I get yelled at by, I yell at chuds and then they yell back at me saying, "Why are you so mad?" And then I just have to go away. Check mic, check mic, check mic, check mic. But they detest Trudeau. Yeah, Polyev is now reduced to saying all liberals are Trudeau in order to keep his hate campaign. I can imagine that. I know. Butterflies, I just can't. I get really angry, and I'm just known as the angry. I'm known as the angry bitch, and it's okay. I understand why I get banned. I really do. I wouldn't want someone coming into my chat and saying things I totally don't agree with either. I'm just so tired of the stupidness. I'm really tired of the stupidness. Where is Trump today? I don't know. Where is Trump any day? I don't think I've seen him. Neil, I did. He's going on Saki. Oh, good. I know. Clayberg's here. Whoop, 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 whoop. Parliamentary system. Party with the most seats forms the government. Party determines its own leader. Each party has different rules. See, they see your name and it's on. I know. It's so dumb. I know. I should just. I just got angry yesterday. Yesterday was really bad. I didn't feel good all day. And then I was really feeling bombarded by the disinformation about the fires. It was really making me angry, and it's my own fault for consuming it. So I did kind of lose it a couple times yesterday. Like, fuck, man, just fucking don't. If you don't know anything about what's going on in Los Angeles or Los Angeles politics or whatever, shut the fuck up. Like, because nobody needs your shit. Nobody needs your advice. Nobody needs your opinion. Nobody needs your sociological profile of what the poverty dynamics are in Los Angeles. Nobody fucking needs it. No one. Shut up. Keep it to yourself. Tell your mom. I'd like to see that. I remember Saki getting snarky with a Canadian reporter. Effing traitor is a Bolivar nickname. Polyev. God, I keep saying it wrong. I'm so sorry. I blame the chuds. They taught me to say it wrong. Yes, it's sentencing day. That's right. And it's TikTok. TikTok, you don't stop. Or maybe you do stop, according to the SCOTUS. So I don't know. The neighbor's twist tying the guy's wrist. Scary. Oh, is that the guy who was setting the fires? Is that what you're talking about, easily? Sorry, I might have missed it. Easily, yeah. I think he's on. Somebody said it's virtual. That's what. What? Carlitos? Wow, that's interesting. I just go for Brett Favre site. Polyvra. 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 Oh, Carlitos, were you not able to spell the word you wanted to? Oh, Jesus, you're up early. It's not really Carl, I don't think, guys, but anyway, let me hold on and get rid of it. Get rid of it. Let's see, where am I? Where's my channel? I don't know. Baby, 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 ooh, baby. Hide user on this channel. Remove.
Well, they should have.
Hey, fake Carlitos, you can't spell that word here. I'm sorry. I figured out a way to avoid you spelling that word. Ha ha. So go fuck yourself. And you're not really Carl. Carl wouldn't do that to me. Just got home with a special donut treat needed after the discussion of blueberry filled his crate. Yeah, Carlitos is actually funny and his thing is orange. Yeah, that's someone pretending to be Carl. That's fine. Hi, Carl. Hi, Carl wannabe. You're not Carl. Carl wouldn't waste his time. Let me tell you that. Carl made a great video about me once, and it was wrong. I mean, it was just the situation was not what he thought it was, but it was still funny, and I laughed.
Okay, he's done talking. You have a chance.
Yeah, he is. He's busy with he's torturing incels on the internet. I don't worry about Carl. But unfortunately, I've set up the banned words list in such a way. Oh, it's bullets. Yeah, it probably is. It's usually like they think they want to spell one of those words, like a bad word, when they do one letter at a time. I've set it up so that it doesn't. It kind of goes around that. So, sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. And you go suck your own dick. I don't watch a lot of streamers. I've been on some other channels and I've noticed no one has as good a chat as I. No. I absolutely love that. Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. Boop, boop. Not that word. That word you can spell. The usual suspects are all present and accounted for. Here we are. One more subscriber from our 918. Is there? Oh my God, are we moving?
No.
Are we crawling and struggling our way?
Do it.
Are we struggling our way to the 1,000 mark? That's all right. It's a struggle. We are the struggle bus. That's true. Click click. That's right. Hey, hit the like. The best chow. How about Indian shot? The best Indian shot. Well, I don't know if we have that. We may not. Is that food? Is that food? Because we may not have that. But we do have a great chat. Oh my God, you guys are so funny. Toot. I want a donut now. Everyone wants donuts. God damn it. We really fucked this up. Food popcorn head? What the fuck is that? Food popcorn head? Are you calling me popcorn head? Only 6 likes. I should be,
Yeah.
Oh my God, sometimes I watch streamers. And they'll be like, how many likes do I have? How many likes do I have? Tell me how many likes do I have? How many subs do I have now? How many subs do I have now? I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you, and this is probably stupid. This is probably me being stupid. I literally... Oh shit, what's going on? Is this going on? No, it's not. Anyway, it should come on anytime. I never look at the likes. I should look at the likes. I never even look at them after the fact. I probably should go back and see. Oh, you just passed a donut shop, Tom. Would you pick up some donuts for all of us? Because we're very hungry. Where are the maggots to? Oh, they're here. Don't worry. Don't bother. They're here. The clowns are here. Don't worry. But we're waiting for... We're waiting for the Supreme Court to do their shit. Do your shit. Let me see if I can find another. I just want to make sure, because sometimes with the Supreme Court... Oh, fucking fuck! No! I hate the... You missed the old-fashioned stick donuts. What do you mean stick donuts? I don't think I've ever... I wouldn't mind a bagel. When a streamer asks for a thumbs up, it gets an automatic thumb down. I know, right? Like Max, I'm like, no, I'm not gonna touch it. I don't know. I just like, if you're worried about how many likes or subscribers you're getting in the middle of your live stream, you're doing the wrong thing. You're not here for the right reasons. But whatever. Let's see here. Where's my? Me. Well, I guess it's not... The Supreme Court's a little late. You know what they're going to do? The Supreme Court's going to end up, like, starting to talk, and then they start their fucking broadcast. They're always late. Alright, I'm going to get rid of that one. Oh, I'm sick of hearing all the sirens. Tacos. Oh, a breakfast taco or an... Uh-oh. Why'd that stop near us? Oh, I love churros. Oh my God. When we were in Spain with my dad, because he used to, like, he would stay in like Fuengirola, you know, which is outside of Malaga in Spain. So one time, where are you going? Yeah, you scared us. What's that woman running? The Supreme Court's doing TikTok today. TikTok, it won't stop. TikTok, it might stop. So in Spain, they had these, you know, like basically what is a cafe cubano, but I think it's probably a different name there, obviously. But they would have these really delicious little coffees and these really delicious hot churros in the morning. And oh my God, you would just stand there and eat and drink and eat and drink. I love good food. Hi, Julie. Good morning. Welcome. How are you, darling? Good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome to everyone in chat. We do have 36 people watching, which is fantastic. Welcome. Say hi. Say hi to the smartest chat on the interwebs. No, welcome, everyone. I'm glad you're here. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. There's no requirement. Clowns are running their favorite third grade levels. Pie sops. Yeah, it's a crazy mixed up world right now, isn't it? Push that. Yes, please push the like. How many likes do I have? How many likes do I have? It is a big number. It's a big number for us. It's a big audience. That's wonderful. I don't know if I've ever had a churro, but they look good. I will take a carnival beaver tail. You know, Jane, I think, well, I don't know what, are those like pastries or are they fried? Yeah, fuck you, bullets. You know, that's the thing. I get a certain amount of chuds watching, which is fine. I don't really care. I don't really care. I'm kidding. Don't get the light. I don't care about the light. Fried. Okay. So it's like but is it like like if I'm thinking about an elephant's ear, oh, it's an apple, or do you want an apple cinnamon donut, Lisa? Beaver tail. Okay, I need to look this up. Hold on. Hold on. This is ridiculous. What? What's a beaver tail? Holy shit! Hold on. Holy poop buckets. Let me show you this. Oh my God. I'm going to make it big. Hold on. Oops. Okay, it's not that big. This is a... What? Oh, what? This is a beaver tail. Whoops. Oh, shit. Oh, okay. Sorry. All right, hold on. We'll come right back.
The blurb, as we call it.
So what happened? What happened? La 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 la. Trump's gonna blurt out. What happened? What happened? I know, right? Trump's gonna blurt out on a tantrum.
That shouldn't happen for 3 reasons.
This is the TikTok
First,
case. God
TikTok
damn it.
Incorporated is a U.S. company speaking in the United States. The act requires it to go dark, executes
Shit.
a qualified divestiture.
Stop it.
Whether you call that a ban or a divestiture, one thing is clear. It's a burden on TikTok speech. So the First Amendment applies. Second, the act is content-based from beginning to end. It applies only to social media platforms that have user-generated content, except for business, product, and travel reviews. Within that content-based universe, it singles out a single speaker for uniquely harsh treatment. And it does so because the government fears that China could, in the future, indirectly pressure TikTok to disseminate foreign misinformation and propaganda.
Thanks, Teresa.
Finally, the act can't satisfy any standard of scrutiny. The government has no valid interest in preventing foreign propaganda. And its fallback, that it seeks merely to prevent covertness, makes no sense, since that could be addressed with a risk disclosure. The government's real target, rather, is the speech itself. It's fear that Americans, even if fully informed, could be persuaded by Chinese misinformation. That, however, is a decision that the First Amendment leaves to the people. Given that the government's data security rationale cannot independently sustain the act, it is also grossly under-inclusive and ignores the most obvious, less restrictive alternative, simply banning TikTok Incorporated from sharing any sensitive user data with anyone.
What's unconditional
In short,
discharge
this
mean?
act should not stand. At a minimum, you should preliminarily enjoin it, which will allow you to carefully consider this momentous issue and, for the reasons explained by the President-elect, potentially moot the case. I welcome your questions.
Exactly what is TikTok's speech here?
TikTok, Your Honor, uses an algorithm that, in its view, reflects the best mix of content. What the act does is it says TikTok cannot do that unless ByteDance executes a qualified divestiture. That's a direct burden on TikTok speech, much less of a burden than the one that this court struck down in the Simon & Schuster case, where all the author had to do was take a certain amount of proceeds and put it into an escrow account for a short period of time to satisfy a civil judgment.
So why does a restriction on ByteDance, which is not a citizen, is not located in the U.S., a restriction on TikTok?
Because what the law says to TikTok is that TikTok, you cannot use the algorithm that you prefer to use unless ByteDance executes a qualified divestiture. So the law therefore falls directly on TikTok itself. It imposes a burden on TikTok speech, again, a much more significant burden than the one that was struck down in Simon & Schuster.
So you're converting the restriction on ByteDance's ownership of the algorithm and the company into a restriction on TikTok speech. So why can't we simply look at it as a restriction on ByteDance?
Because I think the burden falls directly on TikTok, and I can use a hypothetical that helps illustrate the point. Suppose that China used its leverage over Jeff Bezos' international empire, including his Chinese businesses, to force the Washington Post to write whatever China wanted on the front page of the Post. Surely the government couldn't come in and say, Jeff Bezos, you need to either sell the Washington Post or shut it down. That wouldn't just violate Mr. Bezos' First Amendment rights. That would also violate the Washington Post's First Amendment rights, because they are ultimately the one that's suffering the burden under that law, because they have to go dark and close up their books.
Counsel, you began by saying this is a U.S. company operating in the United States.
Yes, Your Honor.
But the ultimate company that controls, and I quote this, to be subject to Chinese laws that require assist or cooperate with the Chinese government's intelligence, quotes, and to ensure that the Chinese government has the power to access and control private data that the company holds. So are we supposed to ignore the fact that the ultimate parent is in fact subject to doing intelligence work for the Chinese government?
Well, Your Honor, I don't think you are supposed to ignore that at all, but I also don't think that it changes the analysis for a couple of reasons. Look, TikTok...
Well, just hold a second. Well, as I said, you began by saying this is a U.S. company operating in the United States, and it seems to me that you're ignoring the major concern here of Congress, which was Chinese manipulation of the content and acquisition and harvesting of the content.
Sure. And I'll start by saying that TikTok Incorporated is a United States subsidiary operating in the United States with its own set of free speech rights.
Do you dispute the fact that ByteDance has ultimate control of TikTok in its corporate organization?
Yes, Your Honor, I do dispute that, but I also don't think that it matters, because even if China could exercise overwhelming power against TikTok versus ByteDance, I don't think it would change the analysis. And I can take that Washington Post hypothetical and ratchet it up a little bit to help illustrate the point. Let's suppose that the Chinese government had actually taken the Bezos children hostage, and it was using that leverage in order to force Bezos and the Washington Post to publish whatever they wanted on the front page of the Post. So China effectively has total control. I still don't think that Congress could come in and tell Bezos either sell the Post or shut it down, because that would violate Bezos's rights and the Washington Post rights. Maybe what they could do is come in and say, you need to disclose the fact that you're under this amount of coercion, so that the people who are looking at the paper understand it and can make their own assessment. But I think the First Amendment rights of both Bezos and the Post would be directly implicated, notwithstanding that China in that scenario has effectively total control over what gets printed in the Washington Post.
Counsel, let me break this down. I understand your argument that there is a First Amendment right that the U.S. company has. I'll go that far with you, okay?
I'll take it.
Because we're affecting their ability to talk in whatever way they choose. The Washington Post could choose without any influence or threat against the children of Mr. Bezos to promote Chinese policy, and our First Amendment would permit them to do that if they chose it independently, correct?
Yes.
Now the question becomes, so it's not, that's just a given that they have a First Amendment right. The next question is, assuming they do, what's the level of scrutiny we imply? Isn't that what the issue here is?
That is certainly one of the issues, Your Honor.
All right. So if we get to that side of the issue, that TikTok USA has some sort of First Amendment right.
I know Monica's not a lawyer, but anyway.
Taking your example, if the government said no speaker is free to speak under a criminal compulsion by someone else because of extortion, because of kidnapping, we are doing this because it is the only way to ensure the safety of people, that they are not going to be kidnapped or threatened, their lives threatened. You don't think that the government has a compelling state interest in saying, if there is a threat, a physical criminal threat against someone to do some
It's not Jill
activity,
Anderson?
that the government couldn't say, I'm not questioning whatever the content is of that activity. I'm simply saying we, in our governmental powers, have a right to say, you can't do that. You can't speak.
Sure, Your Honor. So, to take your question in pieces, I do think that they would have a compelling interest in that scenario to do something. But what I don't think is that they could simply target speakers in speech.
Alyssa
Take, for
McCarthy?
example, generally applicable laws
not
like
Jill
the
So you
trading.
think
Alyssa
in
McCarthy?
that situation that the only thing the government could do is tell the Washington Post, disclose to the public that you are saying this because you are being forced to?
So, sure.
That's the only remedy the government
3.7 is
undertake?
really nothing.
No, Your Honor, but I want to make sure
That's all
I
right.
understand the hypothetical. The compelling
It won't do
interest
anything.
is in
There might be a bigger
preventing
one,
this
but-
kind of compulsion, coercion, and ultimately harm to
Lee,
children.
it is
and I think that the
rough.
government
It's
has
a big travel,
lot
too,
of
for you.
different ways they can address
Oh,
that
we
through
definitely need a
speech-neutral
Snickers.
laws. And I was going to point to things like the Trading with the Enemy Act or Russia sanctions. You can broadly say and attack
They haven't
problems.
been very effective.
Well, be that as
we're
it-
still having people kidnapped. We're still having coercion.
And be that as it may, you can say to Americans, you cannot collaborate with our enemies at all, and if you do that, you're going to be severely punished for doing
All
that.
right, we
But
can
what I
go
don't-
on to the effectiveness of the remedy, but the point is, I believe, that even if your First Amendment rights are impinged
thanks,
and
Oren.
there is some protection, the question is at what level of scrutiny,
Yes, Your Honor.
and whether that the action is content neutral or not.
I agree that that is the way that the analysis proceeds. Here, we believe that the level of scrutiny should be strict scrutiny.
What is the relevance of the history? Chief Judge Srinivasan, in his opinion, in the D.C. Circuit, emphasized that there is a long tradition of preventing foreign ownership or control of media in the United States, going back radio, television, and what have you. I would think
I
no
know.
matter the
Sorry,
level of
Neil.
scrutiny, that history
That's
has
Kavanaugh.
to be important, and I want to get your response to it.
I don't actually think it's important in this context because that history all arises in the context of bandwidth scarcity. And in that context, you have the government that's in the position of doling out a limited number of licenses.
It's still early.
And when you have to dole out a limited
not happy
number of
hour
licenses,
yet.
you by definition have to pick winners and losers. And when you have to do that, you get a certain amount of discretion. I think that's the whole basis of those cases. You can't really take those cases
Well,
and
keep going.
you can't really take those cases and extend them to an area where there is no scarcity like the World Wide Web. Because once you do that, there's really no limiting principle. There's no reason why it wouldn't also apply to really popular books or magazines or newspapers or chains of newspapers. The bandwidth scarcity, I think, is really what justifies the greater discretion that the government gets in that area.
Mr. Francisco, let me see if I can break this down. Suppose that TikTok were outright owned by the People's Republic of China. Would you make the same argument?
I wouldn't be making the same argument, Your Honor.
Why not?
Because there you would have to confront a very different question, whether a foreign government that was speaking in the United States has First Amendment rights, and I don't know that the court has ever addressed that. But here we've got a U.S.
No, I
government.
understand that. I just want to see where you draw the line. So it's true, the court has never held that a foreign government has free speech rights. And if we were to hold that, I would think it would be because
9 o'clock
speech
here in
by
LA.
a foreign government, particularly one with enormous resources,
I like beer. Do you like beer?
is not protected. It does,
Yeah, that's probably
allowing
Alito.
that,
Hi, Steve.
It does not serve the underlying interests of the First Amendment, which are, among other things, fostering democratic self-government and furthering the
fourth highest
the
ranking
the
individual in
search
the United
for
States. Oh,
truth.
wow.
So let's assume that
Thank you for that little
we start
bio
with that. All right.
on Preligar.
What if
Elizabeth
TikTok
Preligar.
were then not owned by the foreign government, but
Hey, Steve,
it
how
was
you doing?
undisputed that
I like
TikTok
beer. Do you
was
like beer?
totally controlled by the foreign government, could not do one thing without the approval of the foreign government? That's different.
I do think that it is different,
I
Your
want
Honor.
that
For
on a
example,
shirt.
you know, I've given the
You can hear the
hypothetical that
sneer,
I've given, but there are a lot of companies in this country that have foreign owners, not just companies like Politico, which is German-owned, or Al Jazeera, which is partly owned by the government
Well,
of Qatar.
I understand that, but what would be the reason for drawing that line?
Sure,
if there's a good reason for saying that a foreign government, particularly an adversary, does not have free speech rights in the United States, why would it all change if it was simply hidden under some kind of contrived corporate structure?
Because it is a U.S. speaker. I'll give you another example. AMC movie theaters used to be owned by a Chinese company. Under this theory, Congress could order AMC movie theaters to censor any movies that Congress doesn't like or promote any movies that Congress wanted. And I think the reason is that here, where it's conceded, you actually have a bona fide U.S. company. It is not simply a Chinese cutout that is the Chinese government speaking itself.
All right, let's
but an
say that's
independent
not a
United
complete-
States
let's
company.
Wait,
say
but
this is
doesn't
not a
it?
complete
You're
answer
telling me the subsidiary in the states
to your First
isn't
Amendment
controlled by
argument, but would
ByteDance?
you be willing to concede that this is a very important factor that should be
I
taken
love
into
TikTok,
account
but
in
bring back
deciding whether
Vines.
There's a First Amendment violation.
Well, Your Honor, I think that it does help supply a compelling
stock.
governmental interest, but I still think you have to march through the strict scrutiny analysis and analyze their interests. I do not think that they have a compelling governmental interest in the manipulation of content. I think that is in the teeth of the First Amendment, and if you look at the government's brief and the rest of the record in this case, that's really what it's focused on. Their complaint is the fear that the content could be critical of the United States government or could undermine our democracy. Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Francisco, I just wanted to follow up on that line of questioning with just some fact questions, because it seems to me there are a couple of things that the parties still dispute about facts in this court, which is a little
How about
unusual.
Telegram or
The
Getter?
government says that TikTok,
Nope,
U.S.,
nothing about those.
has no authority or
Nazis
ability
okay?
to alter the algorithm or recommendation engine, but must simply follow ByteDance's directives. You disagree with that in your reply brief.
Yes,
somebody
we do.
has to be right and somebody has to be wrong about that. What's the fact? What does the record show?
Well, Your Honor, we are here on a record, and there is nothing in the record that says that TikTok, like any other subsidiary, doesn't have its own independent making authority. If you look at their record sites, what they point to is the ordinary types of control that a parent company has over a subsidiary company, but it doesn't change the fact.
All right, what is the fact? Are you prepared to make a representation?
Yes, Your Honor. The fact is that TikTok Incorporated, as a U.S. company, does have a choice over the algorithm. Now, it would be an incredibly bad business decision for them to abandon this algorithm, and they very doubtful would ever do it, but they have that authority. What they clearly have the authority to do is shut down the platform in the face of Chinese pressure. That's actually what they agreed to do in the National Security Agreement. I think that underscores why TikTok Incorporated, as a U.S. company, does have its own set of First Amendment rights.
Okay. And then another fact question. Before the D.C. Circuit, you argued that the Chinese government has made clear in public statements that it would not permit a forced divestment
Paulina, I
of the
didn't hear about
recommendation
that.
engine. Does that mean that some key component of the recommendation engine is under Chinese control?
No, Your Honor. What it means, and this might warrant a little more explanation, what it means is that there are lots of parts of the source code that are embodied in intellectual property that are owned by the Chinese government, and they would restrict, like the United States restricts the sale of those types of things to foreign governments. It doesn't alter the fact that this is being operated in the United States by TikTok Incorporated.
Okay.
So,
I got it.
Okay.
I got it. And then you represent that the divestiture is not feasible within the Act's time frame. I'm sorry for these fact questions.
Sure.
I just want to understand what's before us. Would it be feasible in any time frame? I take the government doesn't dispute that it's infeasible in the 270 days provided by law. But would it be
Your Honor, I think, at least as we understand how they've interpreted the qualified divestiture provision, it would be exceedingly difficult under any time frame for two principal reasons. The first is that there's a global team of engineers that are some in China, some in Europe, some in the United States that maintain and update the original source code. And as we understand their interpretation of qualified divestiture would prohibit any kind of coordination.
I liked World War Z. You know what, Jane? Can I just say something really quick?
Is because
there was something that was like an offline
a qualified divestiture
blog
would divorce the U.S.
that was like a prequel to World War Z. I got to find that. Hold on, I got to find that. It's a long time ago. It's totally disgusting, Paulina. Thank you for sharing the information.
In order to get global content, we need access to the Irish videos. They need access to the U.S. videos. We understand that couldn't happen.
Okay, so you think it's probably not feasible in any timeline?
Well, Your Honor, I think it'd be extraordinarily difficult.
Okay, last fact question, then I'll yield the floor here. The government admits that it has no evidence that TikTok has engaged in covert content manipulation in this country, but says that ByteDance has responded to PRC demands to censor content outside of China in other countries. Again, you deny that in your reply brief. Somebody has to be right about that.
Well, Your Honor, the problem there is everything that follows what you just read is redacted, and so I don't know what it says. What the record shows is two things. The record shows, first, what you just said. They haven't done anything here in the United States with respect to TikTok Incorporated. And second, the record also shows through our transparency reports that we haven't removed or restricted content on the TikTok platform in other parts of the world. And TikTok doesn't operate in China, it operates in other parts of the world. We haven't removed or restricted content at the request of China. That's what we put out in our regular transparency
Removed or
reports.
restricted, though, doesn't necessarily cover covert content manipulation, though, right?
Well, Your Honor, I'm limiting my response to what's in the record.
Okay.
It's very difficult for me to respond to things that I don't know what the accusation is.
I have other questions about the secret evidence in this case, but we'll get to that later.
Yes,
Thank you.
Mr. Francisco, can I ask you a question about the relevant speech here? So it strikes me that this is a little different than your Bezos example, because there it's clearly content discrimination because we're talking about the ability to post particular articles versus other articles.
I do whatever my husband wants.
Am I right that the algorithm is the speech here?
Yes, Your Honor. I would say it's the algorithm is a lot of things. The algorithm has built within it. It's basically how we predict what our customers want to see.
The editorial discretion.
Yeah, the editorial discretion. It also has built within it the moderation elements. All of this kind of comes together when the source code is translated into executable code in the United States. in the United
Isn't there
States
something
that
in World War
executable
Z
code
where
is
it
then
was like
subject
an
to vetting,
offline
review,
transcript
moderation through content
that wasn't part of the
moderation
books,
algorithms,
but it was
so it
published
ultimately
differently? Does
lands
anyone
on the
remember
TikTok
that?
platform.
But what we're talking about as a net choice is the editorial discretion that underlies the algorithm. And I just want to be clear, a lot of your examples talk about, including the Bezos one, the right of an American citizen to repeat what a foreign entity says, or say, you know, I'm hitching my wagon to China, I want to say everything China does. Here, the concern is about the covert
GP, I'm sorry
content
about that. It's
manipulation
fucked
piece
up.
of the algorithm. That is something that ByteDance wants to speak, right?
Well, Your Honor, I think that ultimately it's TikTok's choice whether to put it on the platform.
And you don't want that. Is your client disclaiming
Well,
any...
we absolutely resist any kind of content manipulation by China at all. But what I do want to focus in on is what their asserted interests here. They do talk about covertness.
That's probably true.
But it can't possibly be that all they're concerned about is mere covertness. If all you were concerned about was the covertness,
The algorithm is the
untethered from
speech.
the
That's a really
underlying
good point,
content,
Lisa.
that's something that could be easily addressed through a risk disclosure.
But that goes to scrutiny, the level
Yes, Your
of
Honor.
the application. Let's say that I agree with you, the First Amendment is implicated, and I'm trying to figure out what level of scrutiny applies, and I'm trying to figure out what content, if any, discrimination is going on here. You know, there's a disproportionate burden. Let's say that I agree with you about that. No one is preventing you. I mean, you're seeking access to a particular source code, engineering the recommendation feature. It's the technology that you want. You're not trying to repeat, as in the Bezos example, if we take the speech that the government's concerned about to be the covert content manipulation rationale, you're not seeking to utter that speech.
Yeah, it's a fundamentalist wife
that's
voice.
That's correct, Your Honor. What we are seeking to do is use an algorithm that displays the combination of content that we prefer our users to see on the platform.
And the government doesn't care about that. I mean, the government is fine with you doing that. You can invent it yourself. It doesn't even care what content that displays, cat videos or whatever.
Yeah, but I think that the way that the analysis has to unfold is first you ask, is this law burdening our speech? I think we agree
that's fair.
that the law is burdening our speech. Then you have to look at whether the law itself is somehow content-based, not just what their
Carla's
motivations are,
She's been
but
an op
whether the
from the
law
beginning.
is content-based. And here, the trigger for this law, the one thing that gets it going is if you operate a social media platform that has user-generated content, unless that content takes
that's
the
a
form
great
of a
point.
product, travel, or business review.
Covert content
Then within that
manipulation
universe of
heuristics
content,
probably shouldn't
it
be
says
speech.
there's one speaker we're particularly concerned about, and we're going to hammer home on that one speaker. And then just to make the rubble bounce, they come in and tell us that one of the reasons they're targeting that speaker is because they're worried about the future content on that platform, that it could in the future somehow be critical of the United States or undermine democracy, to pull examples from the government's brief. So I think there's no way to get around the fact that this is a content-based speech restriction, and you do have to go directly to what their interests are. Now, their principal interest is...
I think I'm a little bit surprised by one of the answers that you gave to Justice Barrett.
Our op
I had
has
understood
cookies.
that TikTok's essential complaint here is that they wouldn't be able to use the algorithm that ByteDance has invented, and that they want to use the algorithm that ByteDance has invented.
100%, and if I was unclear on that, Your Honor, I apologize. That is
Okay, because
absolutely
I think
the core
what
of the
Justice
claim.
Barrett was saying to you is like, what's the problem here? Because ByteDance is a foreign company. Or maybe this isn't what Justice Barrett says, it's just what I say. ByteDance is a foreign company, and you started off with Justice Alito saying, we would be making a different argument, and of course that's true. I mean, I would think that
I like
Alliance for
organizing
Open Society
talk. That's my
makes it pretty
algo.
clear that you have to be making a different
And cat
argument with
videos.
respect to a foreign state or a foreign company. So let's say that they don't have First Amendment rights. The only First Amendment rights lie in TikTok, which does have First Amendment rights. I guess my question is, how are those First Amendment rights really being implicated here? This statute says the foreign company has to divest. Whether or not that's feasible, however long it takes, TikTok still has the ability to use whatever algorithm it wants, doesn't it?
No, Your Honor, and their rights are implicated at a most basic level. In 10 days, TikTok wants to speak. In 10 days, because this law was passed, TikTok cannot speak unless ByteDance executes a qualified divestiture. That's not just ByteDance's choice. That is a condition
I
that's
realize
imposed
that
by law.
it definitely has effects on TikTok if ByteDance acts in the way that you are assuming it will act. So this is not to say that the First Amendment isn't involved, because TikTok is going to suffer some pretty severe incidental effects. But they are incidental, aren't they? Because the statute only says to this foreign company, divest or else, and leaves TikTok with the ability to do what every other actor in the United States can do, which is go find the best available algorithm.
I very much disagree that the effects are incidental, because the way that this law works is it is only triggered if somebody is engaging in speech based on their content. User-generated content, except for business product and travel reviews, it then singles out a single speaker, and you have the concession for the government that one of the reasons they've singled out that speaker.
A lot of emphasis on the idea of just like, I think what you're basically saying is that all speaker-based restrictions generate strict scrutiny. I'm not sure that we've ever said anything like that. Let's put aside your argument that this is facially content-based. It seems to me that your stronger argument, or at least the one that most interested me, was this argument of, look, if the government is doing something specifically for the purpose of changing the content that people see, that has to be subject to strict scrutiny. But I don't see that as affecting TikTok as opposed to as affecting ByteDance.
Well, no, I very much do see it as affecting TikTok, because they choose this algorithm because it reflects the mix of content. The government's fear is that China could come in and pressure TikTok through ByteDance to TikTok to alter that mix of content to make it too pro-Chinese or too anti-American. That is very much directly a content-based charge straight at TikTok. The other point I would like to...
I hear you that it might very well have that effect. I guess what I'm suggesting is that the law is only targeted at this foreign corporation which doesn't have First Amendment rights. Whatever effect it has, it has. Maybe ByteDance will figure out a way to put this on open source, and then TikTok will be able to use the algorithm.
So, Your Honor, if I could take that on directly, because I think TikTok has First Amendment rights. To the extent ByteDance is speaking in the United States, it, I believe, has First Amendment rights. If you conclude that neither has First Amendment rights, then surely the creators have First Amendment rights. But if you take a step back, what their position is that none of these entities, this is the universe of entities affected by this law, none of these entities have the authority to assert First Amendment rights, which means that the government really could come in and say, I'm going to shut down TikTok because it's too pro-Republican or too pro-Democrat or won't disseminate the speech I want, and that would get no First Amendment scrutiny by anybody. That cannot possibly be the case, yet that is the effect of their position. The last point I'd like to emphasize, though, is this law, like the Playboy case, like the Hobby Lobby case, has built within it a less restrictive alternative, which is the general provision, by definition designed to protect against the very harm the government is identifying. Suppose New York State passes an asbestos abatement law. They say these types of buildings have to abate asbestos. In addition, New York Times, you have to abate asbestos in your building, and they say there are two reasons for this. One, we want to abate asbestos. Two, we hate the New York Times editorial page. Surely, at the very least, what you're going to say is you can't target the New York Times directly. What you can do is throw them into the general process.
Thank you,
we think that's the minimum that should be done here.
Thank you, Counsel. We've been talking about connection between the regulation of TikTok and the burden on expressive conduct. And your basic position is that interfering with the ownership of TikTok constitutes a direct regulation of the expressive conduct of other people. What is your best example in our precedent of a situation where a regulation of corporate structure or something else has been treated as a direct regulation of expressive conduct?
The regulation of a corporate structure as Your Honor, I don't have a case at my fingertips. I can consult.
Well, I don't have one at my fingertips or any other
rebuttal,
but
but I think it's quite clear, though, that if you're saying to a company, you have to stop talking unless somebody else does something, and that's imposed by the force of law, it directly affects that company's speech.
Well, it's again, I don't know if it's directly affecting the company's speech or the speech of third parties, and I'm not sure what where your emphasis is. But again, I'm not sure there's another case where we've said that regulating a company others' expression should be treated as direct imposition on their speech in terms of the standard of review, for example, when it's based on derivative regulation of corporate structure of somebody else.
Well, Your Honor, I think that I would concede that this is a pretty unprecedented case. I'm not aware of any time in American history where the Congress has tried to shut down a major speech platform. But I think that if a law imposes
those are big stats,
a
Max.
direct
My
regulation
goodness.
on a third party, that in turn results in shutting down somebody else's
Time to
speech,
get more
and
on
they do
TikTok,
it for
I think.
content-based, viewpoint-based reasons, and in particular on this record, because the speaker that is ultimately being shut down, they don't like the speech of that particular platform. That's a real problem.
So it may be a real problem or may not, but I just am wondering if there's any precedent where we have that same connection and that it affects the standard of review, for example. You would treat it as a direct restriction on expression. Even the only thing the law does is say, in this case, somebody other than the Chinese government has to own.
So we don't have any direct precedent along the lines that you're citing, but we do have precedents. We have cases like ACARA, and what ACARA says is if the law is totally speech neutral, then that's one thing. We have cases like O'Brien, which say if the law doesn't care about speech but happens to draw in speech, that's another thing. Both of those cases make clear, however, is
Yes,
that when the
TikTok
law
does
is
have good legal
concerned
representation.
with the content of the speech, when the justification is based on the content of the speech, that's cases like Reed 2, then you do trigger strict
So
scrutiny.
then I think your argument comes down to, is this direct concern with speech, or is it concerned with the potential for Chinese interference with the level of interference indirectly? In other words, they're not coming back. The Chinese government, TikTok, doesn't care what the people are saying on TikTok. That's not the concern. The concern is that they
Do you mean
are
like a Section
regulating
230 kind of thing,
a particular channel of communication. And I just wonder if there's any precedent for that type of thing. They're not saying we're going to restrict this content.
But is it that they aren't
neutral?
Okay, but is it that they aren't neutral given the
We're going to be in a
algorithm?
position
Or
where we can control
is that the
what
issue?
happens, whether it's
Or an
based on
issue?
the expression, whether it's based on anything else.
So, Your Honor, I disagree, and I think if you take a step back and look at this record, I think it is quite clear that it is focused on both current and
It's time to
potential
get
future
good
content
news.
on TikTok. TikTok Incorporated.
It's media,
Here
bringing
you don't
media
have
literacy to
just an
TikTok
act
is really
that is
important
based
then.
on
That's
speakers
what I'm
and speech.
taking
It's
away.
triggered by speech. It's focused on a single speaker, TikTok Incorporated.
It's a huge audience.
Justice Alito?
What if Congress, if there were nothing in this act about content
I haven't read the briefs
moderation
either.
or
Damn, I
covert
should've.
manipulation? What if it was just about preventing what Congress viewed as an enormously powerful, popular application from gathering an arsenal of information about American citizens, and they said this is the worst offender and we're going to require divestiture by this offender? Would there be a First Amendment problem there? And if you think there would be, what would the level of scrutiny be?
Yes, there would be a First Amendment problem if you had a law like this that was only focused on speakers, those who use user-generated content other than product, travel, or business.
Well, Congress concludes that this particular entity is the worst. This is the worst offender, and it happens to be an entity that is involved with speech.
If all you had, so I want to make sure I understand the hypothetical. The only provision you have is one that says this company has to shut down because of data security.
Right.
I would have a different set of arguments. I think it would still implicate the First Amendment, particularly where you have strong evidence that they were being
Bullshit.
targeted in part, at least because of their speakers and speech. Suppose Congress passed the law that you
Well,
posited.
you're changing the hypothetical by injecting congressional concern about that.
I
Okay, well, I'll
totally
put that to the
understand what
side.
you're
So what
saying.
would your argument be? It would be an equal protection argument?
Just thought about
I'd
that
still
the
be
other
saying-
night.
I'd still be saying that ACARA itself makes clear that where a law disproportionately
I don't know if I want to
burdens
invest
just
time.
a speaker, we have to subject that
Nothing
to scrutiny
means
to suss it
anything.
out, to suss out whether the asserted interest is the actual interest. There, the asserted interest is in data security. I think I would have a couple of arguments under whatever form of scrutiny you wanted to apply, whether it is strict scrutiny or intermediate scrutiny.
I
in
just
that
think the
context.
age of the
I would say
consumer
first
is
that
not
that law
here.
is dramatically under-inclusive because it categorically
Not about us
exempts
right now, I
e-commerce
guess,
apps
which
that
is
this
so
record
dumb.
shows have comparable ties
All
to
right,
China.
you say
Correct.
I don't want to prolong this too much. You say this is not like ACARA, I think primarily because you say that the divestiture requires the new company to cease using the algorithm, right?
No, I think it's not like ACARA for a much more fundamental sense. ACARA involved a totally speech-neutral law. It didn't go after speakers at all. If you had a law in ACARA that said we're going to prohibit prostitution in bookstores only, then I think that ACARA would have come out differently. There would have at least been, some kind of intermediate scrutiny, potentially strict.
All right, well,
That's the law that I think is your
walk
hypothetical.
away from the hypothetical that I
think so,
posed
Your
for the
Honor.
purpose of narrowing in on what your argument is. I understood you to say that that would not be a solution to the problem because one of Congress's motivations was based on the content of TikTok. Am I wrong in that? Did I read your argument incorrectly?
Well, I think that I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. I certainly think that because one of the motivations was content, that is an enormously important fact. I was trying to answer your hypothetical where we were trying to take that out of the mix.
That, I think,
and the
GP
reason why
and,
ACARA is different is because
just
ACARA
Chinese,
didn't just simply say no prostitution in
not wanting
bookstores.
China
That's
to
what your hypothetical effectively
anything.
says. It says no data security problems in speakers or in this particular speaker. And I think
it's
that would trigger,
morphed,
at the
right?
very
I think
least,
there was an
intermediate
aspect of the
scrutiny.
data.
Thank you.
Justice Sotomayor?
Which didn't they
So
weren't
my
they
question,
forced to move
which
some
is,
places or some data
Justice,
storage to the United
the
States
Chief
last year?
Justice asked you whether or not we've ever had a case where pure ownership was at issue and not speech. And I don't think we've had one like that. You're right, but I don't think that your the question gets to the essence of your argument, is it? The essence of your argument is you're
I
being
need to get
asked
more source information for you,
divest
but
because
I'll
of
do
speech,
that.
Correct?
Correct.
All right. So if I get past that,
I do think
if
a
I
few
go
things
to
have happened.
Justice Alito's point, which is I don't think it's just about speech; it's about data control. If it's about data control, and assume, for the sake of argument, that I believe intermediate scrutiny applies to the data control provision, then your arguments would be different, wouldn't they? They would be under inclusiveness. They would be other arguments, correct?
Well, I think they'd be very similar because I think the nature of our arguments work just as well under intermediate and strict scrutiny. If I could
All
unpack
right.
that a little.
No, I'm not going to,
Sure.
because we're going to run out of time, because we're going to need to figure
Is it
out
the fact
what
that it's a
intermediate
foreign
scrutiny
entity?
means. But I'm not sure it means what you do, which is I don't think any of our cases have ever suggested
good point, Lisa.
that we have to use the least restricted means under intermediate scrutiny. In fact, our cases have said we have to use a reasonable means.
And if I could respond to that point specifically, I completely agree it's not a least restrictive means alternative, Your Honor. But you do have to at least consider alternatives. Here, if the concern, let's take the data security concern, which you put your finger on.
I know you want to keep going on, but I can't let you because I can't monopolize the argument, okay? But let me just get to the bottom of that, all right? You seem to suggest that Congress has to actually look at all of the alternatives and say no. I don't think we have a case that says that.
I am not.
If from the record it's clear that alternatives won't be adequate for whatever set of reasons, isn't that enough?
If the record were clear on that, that might be enough.
Now I
Here
hear that.
on
Now
the
let me
key,
go to the next question and the last.
if I could, Your Honor, just one sentence. If on the key less restrictive alternatives, they had actually considered them and said what you suggested, this would be a different case. But our point is that on the key, most obvious, less restrictive alternatives, a law, for example, that simply prohibits TikTok Incorporated from sharing any sensitive user data with ByteDance or anyone else, there's nothing in the record that suggests they even considered it. And that's why it would fail under even intermediate scrutiny.
We have a different problem, which is that the record shows that there is no sharing that could happen that wouldn't put the data at security. But we can go past that.
That's incorrect, actually.
No, because the NSA doesn't.
I'm not talking about the NSA.
Or even anything else. But putting that aside, one last question. Assuming that the covert manipulation issue is one, I think that what remains is, to the Chief's question and Justice Alito's questions, if the covert manipulation is a concern, then the question becomes what kind of burden does it put on TikTok USA? And I think your point is that that requires strict scrutiny because it doesn't permit them to speak to the Chinese government through the algorithm and promote whatever speech it wants to promote through the algorithm. Correct?
It doesn't permit them to speak to the American public through the algorithm.
Right.
And promote whatever type of speech they want to promote on the algorithm. And I also think that this covert manipulation is a little bit odd. They're not concerned just with covertness. If all you were concerned
I'm going to
with
ask
secret,
she about that. How do you disentangle the two things?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Justice Kate? Justice Gorsuch? Justice Kavanaugh?
Just on the data collection interest, I think Congress and the President were concerned that China was accessing information about millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans, including
Lisa,
teenagers,
thank
people
you.
in their 20s.
Thank you. What about
They would use
Rumble?
that
I don't know.
information
What about any
over
of them?
time to develop spies,
I know.
to turn people, to blackmail people, people who a generation from now will be working in the FBI or the CIA or in the State Department. Is that not a realistic assessment by Congress and the President?
I think that's part of the
risks
issue is that
here?
nothing
Well,
is
Your Honor, I'm not
privately owned in
disputing the
China,
risks. I'm
so that's
disputing the
it's an
means that
extension of the
they've chosen.
government. I
One
don't know if
way,
that's
the
really
most direct
accurate,
way
but
to
that would
address
be
that,
my
all of this
assumption.
user data sits on data servers in Virginia controlled by
I just
Oracle.
love that
I'm
you
not
two
talking about the
fight and
national
then you come
security
back
agreement. What I'm
together.
talking
I just
about
think
is a
that's so
law that
great.
simply says to TikTok
Really resilient.
Incorporated and
You're
its
a very
US
resilient
employees, you
duo.
cannot share that user data with anybody. You can't give it to ByteDance. You can't give it to China. You can't give it to Google. You can't give it to Amazon. You cannot give it to anybody under threat of massive penalties. They never even considered that most obvious alternative. And so whether you apply intermediate scrutiny or strict scrutiny, it's not a least restrictive means test, but you got to at least consider the most obvious alternative.
So you acknowledge the risk that Congress and the President were concerned about. You're just saying the means they chose to address that risk were incorrect,
So
not permissible.
I certainly acknowledge the risk, but I think there are lots of reasons, not just the one I just gave, but there are lots of reasons why that risk still can't justify the law. When it sits alongside of the impermissible covert manipulation risk, I think it falls under Mount Healthy. It's no different if they came in and said, we passed this law, one for data security.
I understand that, but just on the data collection, that seems like a huge concern for the future of the country.
And Your Honor, again, it is a concern, two responses. First, it is a concern that can be addressed directly. The reason why there's no evidence in this record about whether that kind of direct prohibition on TikTok Incorporated from sharing sensitive user data with anybody, including ByteDance, the reason why the record is devoid of any evidence of that is because Congress never considered the other side of the balance. And that's the minimum that Congress has to do under the First Amendment. It's got to at least consider the consequences of shutting down a speech platform used by 170 million Americans against the benefits of an alternative, like simply saying that TikTok's employees, you're essentially going to get massive fines, potentially jail sentences, if you share any of that sensitive user data with anybody.
I know. I closed
Not
my
TikTok,
Instagrams.
Not ByteDance. I'm sorry, not
I
ByteDance,
closed
not
my
China, not anybody
Facebooks.
else in the world. Yet there's nothing in this record.
I think it takes a
that
few
suggests
days
they
for them
even
to
considered that
disappear,
alternative.
but they're deleted, not deactivated. They are fucking deleted.
Spell that out.
At least as I
It felt
understand
great.
it, we go dark. Essentially, the platform
felt really good.
shuts down.
Unless there's a divestiture.
And trust me, I didn't make any impact on them whatsoever, but at least my little dumb accounts are
on January
gone.
19th, we
No
still
more
have
Meta.
President Biden. And on January 19th, as I understand it, we shut down. It is possible that come January 20th, 21st, 22nd, we might be in a different world. Again, that's one of the reasons why I think it makes perfect sense to issue a preliminary injunction here and simply buy everybody a little breathing space.
as soon
This
as
is an
I post in
enormously-
both.
Shut down too. Can you
I
just
post
spell
in
that out?
both.
So
I'm only posting on X because I don't think I leave it all to the
app is not
maggots.
available in the app stores.
I think a few
That's
of us
at a
can
minimum.
stay and just
But in
like have
addition,
fun
what
with
the app says
maggots.
is that all of the
You
other
know,
types
and
of
also
service
some
providers
drops are still
can't
made
provide
there that are
service either.
important and
Now,
timely.
there's enormous
But
consequences
you're right,
for
Paul.
violating that
I
to
can't
service
wait till the
providers.
day when I
So
delete
essentially,
my
you know,
X.
what they're going to say is that, you know, I think we're not going to be providing the
It's
services
coming.
necessary to have you.
I'm going to
see
end
it.
up being a hermit
So it's essentially
with just
gonna
YouTube.
stop operating. I think that's the consequence.
But I think
of this
people
law,
should leave
which
X.
again
I
is
absolutely
why,
agree.
A short
I agree.
reprieve here would make all the sense in the world. It's an enormously consequential decision.
Why stress
And-
out?
And I
Right?
think all
Like,
would
why?
benefit
Why
if
stress
it
out?
weren't necessary.
Thank you.
Justice Barrett?
So I just want to, it's kind of following up on Justice Kavanaugh's questions. Let's say I agree with you that some level of scrutiny applies, and I'm trying to figure out which level of scrutiny applies, and I'm trying to figure out if
Ego.
there's content discrimination. And let me ask you a different question than I did before about the algorithm. I mean, you keep saying shut down. The law doesn't say TikTok has to shut down. It says ByteDance
I know,
has
Val,
to
you're
divest.
so good.
If ByteDance
Yeah,
divested
I
TikTok,
understand.
we
And you
wouldn't be
also
here,
should
right?
download
if
your
ByteDance
data
was
so
willing
you
to
have
let
some of
you
your
go
media.
and willing to let you take the source code with you, that would be fine, right? We would not be here.
Well, Your Honor, if ByteDance divested, then the law wouldn't fall on TikTok. But the law will.
Yeah, Paul.
Not
Hello.
ByteDance.
But that's
The
because
law
of
Hi,
ByteDance's
Captain
choice,
Obvious.
right?
No,
I mean,
well,
this is like Justice Kagan's point. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how we account for the reality of third-party choices and the choices of third parties that the whole reason
Great.
for the law being passed in the first place.
Yeah, Your Honor, I still don't. I think that the way the analysis works is step one. Is there a First Amendment violation?
We're going to brand them
Step
special
two, you get to the
Lolo's
question
Lounge
that we're grappling
glow
with.
sticks.
What standard
They're
of
going to be
scrutiny
hot
do you
pink.
apply?
I'm just going to tell you that right
Typically,
now.
what
You
do
can't convince
is
me
you
otherwise.
ask, is this law content-based? Is it content-based based on its face? Is it content-based in its decision? Here, we know it's content-based
Ooh,
on
yeah,
its
the
face
5'8"
because
is
it says
good.
what it
I love
says.
Greg
We know
and
it's
Stephanie.
content-based in its
Greg's such
motivation
a
because the
wonderful
government
guy.
concedes it's content-based in its motivation.
Well, that's not quite what I'm asking. I mean,
I
let's
think
see,
it-
that's the dispute between
Yeah.
you and the government. Is,
It will
is it
raise money
content-based
for
if it's
abortion
about
services.
divestiture and not
Let's
about
do it.
telling TikTok what content it can display on the platform?
And I think it has to be because I think that really goes to the first question. Does the burden fall on the speaker? If the burden falls
Yes, his
on the
Prevail
speaker,
is
that triggers the
amazing. It's a
speaker's
great
First Amendment
Substack,
rights.
and it's free.
But the
You don't
law
have to
is, in
subscribe
fact,
to get it. It's
content-based,
really
whether
great.
it comes in the form of a divestiture or something else. When the law specifically says it's content-based, we're worried about the content on the platform. And when the government tells you that one of our reasons, one of the things that we're worried about is TikTok, not ByteDance, but TikTok Incorporated and TikTok in the United States will, absent the divestiture, have a mix of content that we find objectionable. They will mix around their videos
That's
in a
right,
way that is
GP. I
too
forgot about
pro-Chinese
that.
or too
You
anti-American. And
mentioned that
is
about
TikTok, the
Substack
platform.
and their
Let me just ask you
ownership.
one last question. Why is it impossible
We've got
to
a
divest
problem
in the
with
270
fucking
days, even
assholes
assuming that the
owning
Chinese
shit.
government hadn't said you couldn't?
Sure, and this is the exchange I was having with Justice Gorsuch. There are two basic reasons. The first is that the underlying source code.
I don't know, but it was a conversation we had. GP knows more about it.
But that's what Justice Gorsuch said, just not ever. So it's not really that you can't do it within the time frame. It's that you really couldn't ever divest because you never are going to get the source.
I don't know. I mean, not all.
No, it's
not all short men are evil. Come on.
Update and maintain that. It would take
Open
us many
source
years
is where it's
to
at. Maybe that's the
reconstruct
direction
a
we're
brand
moving
new
in,
team
Paul,
of
and
engineers to do that
we
with
go
respect
through
to
this
the source
chaos
code.
of capitalism,
With respect to the sharing of content,
and then it
that was the
becomes
different reason. In theory, we could kind of send our salesmen around the world, go to Ireland, go to Finland, go to every country and say, look, you used to automatically get our content, but now you got to separately sign up for our platform.
Last point, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. It's not that you couldn't execute the
Gal's been on his show,
disentanglement. You could
his
say we're
podcast,
independent.
like 6 times.
You just can't recreate TikTok in any kind of way.
Well, I think that any new TikTok would be a fundamentally different platform with different content, which is yet another reason
damn it.
why I think this
Dark
is a
at Shooby-Doo.
content-based
I'm going to tell you right now,
that falls
he's fucking
directly on
so
TikTok
weird.
incorporated itself in our platform.
Yes, I can.
Justice Jackson?
So I guess I'm
Where
back
am I?
to some of
Where
the
is
questions that Justice Barrett and Justice Kagan asked about the sort of threshold issue that you point out, which is there a burden on the speaker? I'm trying to understand what the burden is that you are
yes. Oh, sorry. So it's content related.
Really
Forgive me. Immense amount of
association
transphobia and
not
hateful
speech.
content, misinformation on
You say
Substack.
You have in your brief some cases that talk about American speakers.
It's just
being free
endemic,
to
and we
choose
need
whether
to we need to
affiliate
just I don't know
with
how
foreign
we get beyond
organizations.
this.
And the
I
colloquy
just
you
don't
had
know.
with Justice Kagan made me think that what you're really complaining about is
my
the
God, Dark,
inability
that's
to associate
obscene
with
is what that
ByteDance
is.
and its algorithm. That it's not really about, if TikTok came up with its own algorithm or
I don't know what the
bought
right
an
answer is,
algorithm from
really.
some other company or devised it or whatever, this law would have nothing to do with them from your perspective. But the problem I think you're articulating, and this is I'm seeking your clarification.
Sure.
The problem I think you're articulating is that you want to use ByteDance's algorithm and therefore associate
Paul
with
J is
ByteDance,
wonderful.
and Congress
So
has
there
prohibited
goes that
that
theory.
by requiring divestiture. So isn't this really a right of
smarty pants
association case?
GP. Good for you.
I think it's both, Your Honor. I do think that that is a component of it. We want to use the algorithm that we think reflects the best mix of content.
I know.
That's
all
the
of them. All
algorithm
these
that
assholes,
reflects the
Jim
best
and
mix
Jane,
of
they need to
content.
go.
What this law says is we can't do that unless ByteDance
right now they're having a
exercises
moment.
qualified divestiture. But I
The
also
shitheads
think
are having
more
a moment.
directly what this law does is it says to TikTok Incorporated, if ByteDance doesn't exercise a
I guess so.
qualified divestiture,
Why don't we
you
bring
have to go
Vines
mute.
back?
You cannot speak at all.
No, I
full
don't think it
stop,
says
period.
that, though. I mean, if TikTok were to post-divestiture or whatever, pre-divestiture, come up with its own algorithm, right, then when the divestiture happened, it could still operate. It doesn't say TikTok, you
I
can't
think that's
speak.
theoretically correct, Your Honor, but I
Right,
think that
but-
also underscores the content-based nature of the restriction.
No,
We have
but
to
the fact,
change our
excuse me, the
speech.
fact that that's true suggests that you're wrong about the statute being read as saying TikTok, you have to go mute. Because TikTok can continue to operate on its own algorithm, on its own terms, as long as it's not associated with ByteDance. So isn't this really just all about association?
Your Honor, I think it is partly about association, but I'm going to take another shot at explaining why it's not just about association.
Okay, well, let me just take you down the association path for a second, because if it is about the association of TikTok with ByteDance, then don't we have cases that seem to undermine your view that Congress can't do this? I mean, I thought we had cases about Congress prohibiting association with terrorist organizations, prohibiting association with foreign adversaries. And so why doesn't this fall into that kind of group of our jurisprudence?
Well, at least as I understand all of those cases, they applied strict scrutiny. The material support statute most definitely applied.
And
strict
ultimately
scrutiny.
upheld the law, so fine.
But sure, and I think if we go down the strict scrutiny road here, I don't see that this law can possibly be satisfied under the interests that they assert here. But I do want to emphasize why this is also about TikTok speech. Even under your hypothetical, where theoretically they can say something differently than they are saying today. That in and of itself is a direct restriction on TikTok's speech. They can't engage in the speech they want to engage in. They have to engage in a different kind of speech, the speech they don't want to engage in. That is a direct burden on TikTok incorporated speech.
All right, I think I understand that argument. Let me ask you a question about your colloquy with Justice Kavanaugh. Did I understand you to concede that there is a compelling interest and that the problem is really tailoring? I mean, you said, I understand the risks. I don't hear you suggesting that the risks don't exist. So it sounds like we've gotten past, even if we're in strict scrutiny world, we've gotten past the compelling interest part of this.
No, Your Honor. What I was saying is that all you had standing alone were the data security. That would be a different case. Here, when you have the content manipulation sitting right alongside of the data security, that taints the data security rationale. If Congress came in and said, we're passing this law for two reasons. One, we really care about data security, and two, we hate the speech on TikTok. The data security wouldn't alone sustain that law under cases like Mount Pleasant.
I understand, but why you're equating we don't want foreign adversaries to be able to manipulate the content on this platform. You're equating that with we hate the content. And I'm just trying to understand why.
Because content manipulation is by definition a content-based distinction. Look, everybody manipulates content. There are lots of people who think CNN, Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times are manipulating their content. That is core protected speech. That's why they put so much weight on this mere covertness.
Right, but that analysis is just about content-based versus content-neutral, and therefore whether you apply strict scrutiny. I'm in the strict scrutiny world, okay? I'm assuming that you're right, that strict scrutiny applies, and now prong number one in that world is, does the government have a compelling interest? And so I'm trying to understand why the government's argument that we have data manipulation concerns, which I understood you in colloquy with Justice Kavanaugh to say is a risk, and we are concerned based on what Justice Gorsuch says when he's looking at the facts, that the government contends that there's this real problem with this foreign adversary doing manipulation in other places. Are you saying those are not compelling government interests?
I am 100% saying that content manipulation is not just not a compelling governmental interest, it is an impermissible governmental interest. You could not go to CNN or Fox News and say, we're going to regulate you because you're manipulating the content in the way that we don't like. That is per se impermissible.
Okay, can I just ask you one last thing? You say, with respect to the tailoring issue, that disclosure, you think, is a possible, more narrowly tailored way of handling some of this. And I guess I'm just wondering whether disclosure under this court's case law and the law of other lower courts doesn't carry its own First Amendment complications. That wouldn't we have compelled speech problems if disclosure was required in this situation?
Sure, Your Honor. Now, look, I might think so because I think that the factual predicate is wrong, but they think the factual predicate is right. And if the factual predicate is right, then there are no First Amendment problems at all under Zauder and the cases that you're suggesting. And that underscores the larger problem here. Not all disclosures are perfect. I'm not here to argue that they are. But you've always got to consider what the alternative is. And here the alternative is shutting down one of the largest speech platforms in America. The reason there's no evidence in this record as to disclosures is because Congress never even undertook that balancing in the first place.
Thank you.
The bare minimum that has to be done before we take an unprecedented
we're in there.
step
We're
of
all
shutting
up in
down
that
the voices
business.
of 170 million Americans.
Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Fisher?
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, wholly apart from the company's legal interests here, the Act directly restricts the rights, the First Amendment rights of American creators to participate and speak in what the court a little less than a decade ago called the modern public square. And what you might say today is the most vibrant speech forum in the United States of America. And the act, therefore, is inescapably subject to strict scrutiny because of the First Amendment implications. And the act fails that test, and indeed any level of scrutiny under this court's case law, because the act and the reasons behind it defy our history and tradition, as well as precedent. American creators have long and always enjoyed the right to speak in conjunction with foreign speakers or work with foreign publishers. Americans even have the right under the Lamont case to receive information from foreign speakers, indeed foreign governments. So that leaves the government with this implication and its use of the phrase national security in this context. But that just simply doesn't change the calculus. Throughout our history, we have faced ideological campaigns by foreign adversaries. Yet under the First Amendment, mere ideas do not constitute a national security threat. Restricting speech because it might sow doubt about our leaders or undermine democracy are kind of things our enemies do. It is not what we do in this country. And so we think the court should reverse, and I would welcome the court's questions.
How exactly are the creators' speech being impeded?
So two ways, Justice Thomas. First, I just point you to the text of the statute, which directly regulates text, images, real-time communications, videos. My clients, the creators, are the ones creating that speech and posting it to speak to other Americans.
But it doesn't say anything about creators or people who use the site. It's only concerned about the ownership and the concerns that data will be manipulated or there will be other national security problems with someone who's not a citizen of this country or a company that's not here.
So there's two ways, and I think the Sorrell case is where you look for the analysis of the First Amendment burden here. As I said, the text of the statute regulates our speech, and then you point out ownership, and this was talked about a lot in the first part of the argument here, so let me be very clear. The American creators have a right to work with the publisher of their choice. So imagine somebody wanted to work on post speech on Twitter, now known as X, and Congress passed a law saying, we don't like the current owner of X. The current owner of X has to sell that platform or else it has to shut down. People who post on that platform and who indeed some of them make a living commentating, engaging on current events, news, politics, would have a First Amendment claim to work with
using that
publisher.
argument, you could have said that about the breakup of AT&T. You could say that about the foreign limitations on foreign ownership of broadcast companies.
Well, no, I think that you have to dig a little deeper than that, Justice Thomas. It's not mere foreign ownership, and it's certainly the broadcast cases I'll get to in a moment, but it's foreign ownership because of a particular perspective. If you boil it down to an essence, the owner of a print media or online media publication is the essence of the viewpoint of that publication.
Yes, Paulina, that's Clarence Thomas.
The current owner of X or the current owner of Fox News or the current owner of MSNBC has a particular perspective, and working with that particular platform is shot through with the ownership from top to bottom.
But why couldn't Congress prohibit Americans from associating with certain foreign organizations that have interests that are hostile to the United States? I mean, I thought that's what Holder versus Humanitarian Law Project allowed. So I don't really understand what you mean.
Right. So I'm glad you're bringing that up.
Yes.
So when it comes to this national security, you are right that Congress can prohibit Americans, to use that case as an example, from associating with terrorist organizations or other organizations that pose a clear and present danger to this country. This case, Justice Jackson, is fundamentally different. What the government tells you in its own brief that it is worried about here are the ideas that might be expressed on TikTok. We might undermine U.S. leadership. We might sow doubts about democracy. We might have pro-China views. And so if you look to whether that is legitimate interest, my fundamental submission, and this I think goes to the last colloquy you were having with Mr. Francisco, is that is an impermissible government interest. And you look throughout our history and tradition, and I think the place I would point you most directly would be the opinions of Justice Brandeis and Whitney and Justice Holmes and Abrams.
I guess I don't understand how that's distinguishable from what's happening in Holder. So can you just say a little bit
more? It goes to the nature of the national security threat. So my position is the government just doesn't get to come in and say national security in the case is over or you don't get to associate. You have to dig underneath what is the national security claim. And what Justice Holmes said in his Abrams dissent, and I know that was a dissent, these are hard issues, but that has been vindicated over time, is that it's not enough to say national security. You have to say, what is the real harm? Is it terrorism? Is it where our battleships are located?
Justice Kavanaugh presented a number of potential risks right, with foreign adversaries using covert manipulation of the data platforms.
I
that
love
are being
Escape
used
from
by,
LA and Escape from New
youths
York. Oh my
today
God.
that would then make it more likely that people would turn into spies and do terrible things to the United States. This is a hypothetical, but you know what I'm saying?
I get it. So I think if I understood Justice Kavanaugh correctly, he was talking about the data security argument. So let me just pull these apart. You first have an argument, and the government itself separates these two arguments in its brief. The first argument, the one I'm focusing on initially, is the content manipulation argument. And that argument is that our national security is implicated if the content on TikTok is anti-democracy, undermines trust in our leaders. They use various phrases like that in their brief. So my primary submission is that is an impermissible government interest that taints the entire act. Now, there's a secondary argument the government makes, and we say you don't even get to that because once you have an impermissible motive like that, the law is unconstitutional. But even if you could get to that, Justice Jackson, I do grant that data security and the way Justice Kavanaugh spelled it out is compelling. That is compelling.
We're going to do a double header of those
You
next
just
week.
Don't ask in the air, was Congress worried about data security, or could it reasonably be worried about data security? You say, can this act, the act before you, be sustained on data security grounds? And our answer to that has to be no. You don't have to look any further.
What do you call
than
an alligator that practices law? A litigator.
Itself, which says that the content recommendation algorithm cannot be used in the future. Well, that has nothing to do with data security. So the core feature of the divestiture provision is going at content manipulation, which I said is impermissible. You can't uphold that under data security grounds. And the rest of the act, when you look at the covered companies provision, Justice Jackson, if this were primarily a data security law, what you think you'd find is what kind of data
I do see a lot of influence,
is it shared? Those are the
but
things
I don't
you think
know.
you'd find
That's a
under
bigger
covered
question.
companies, but
How
you
do we
don't find
regulate
that.
foreign
What you find
influence
is
in our
our
media?
text images
Hello,
shared. Is
Russia would like you to
content
hold their
being
beer.
shared between users? Is it being created and posted in the social
We don't even
media
know who the
platform?
600 people
So
who we
I
know
don't dispute for 1 second
are
that
paid
data
by a
security
foreign
is a very
government to
important thing,
influence
and Congress
opinions in
this
this
very
country.
law
We don't even know who
regulated
those
data
people
security
are.
in other ways, but
Could
to
we
do
start
with
there?
Data brokers, that's perfectly permissible.
And leave the
But
cat
question before
videos
you
and the
today was
organizing
narrower.
talk?
The question is this law before you sustainable on data security grounds? And that answer has to be no.
Congress doesn't care about what's on TikTok. They don't care about the expression. That's shown by the remedy. They're not saying TikTok has to stop. They're saying that the Chinese have to stop controlling TikTok. So it's not a direct burden on the expression at all. Congress is fine with the expression. They're not fine with a foreign adversary, as they've determined it is, gathering all this information.
Do you not
about
feel the same way, sir?
170 million people who use TikTok.
Well, again, Mr. Chief Justice, if I may, let me separate the where you started, which was the content manipulation, and then go to the data security part of it. So,
well, the
I
first part
understand,
was not. I'm not talking about the content manipulation. I'm talking about the content harvesting.
Everything tracks us.
When you say content harvesting, do you mean people's
Well,
data?
they've got
or
all
that?
the information, whatever algorithms they want, that has access to the personal information, or at least information that is not readily available.
Yeah, I guess it's
about
true. Different
170
ownership.
million Americans, and whether they're going to use it in 10 or 15 years when those people grow up and have different jobs in different places, or whether they're going to use it now. That, at least as I look at the congressional record, is what Congress was concerned about.
Well, I think
and they're not concerned about the fact that it is available. As I said, the remedy is just somebody else has to run TikTok. So they're not concerned about the content. They're concerned about what the foreign adversary is doing.
So if I may, I think to answer your question properly, I think I have to separate two things. One is the content recommendation algorithm. And that's what I was speaking about a moment ago. That has nothing to do with data security. That doesn't itself procure data. That just determines what videos people see on their feed on TikTok. As
Kevin
to
O'Leary
that, I think the answer
shits
is
on
inescapably
everything.
that the government and Congress itself was worried about content. The government itself is here saying national security.
Well, it's Friday,
so
Tom.
like
I
a
hope
mix
so.
of cat videos or dance videos doesn't affect national security. No matter what happens, the only thing that can affect data
Did you write
security,
their argument?
national security, are the substance of those videos. And when the government's pressed in its briefing, it outright tells you that. It says what we're really worried about is sowing doubts about U.S. leaders, et cetera. So let me turn then to data
But that's
security.
an algorithm
Yes,
feeding them
there
certain
were various
content
congresspersons and in the
to that.
record we
But
have
isn't
in
that the
DC
government
Circuit,
doing
there were
that? So again,
conversation
we're going
about
back to the
problem of
foreign
data security
ownership.
here.
What?
As I said, I don't dispute that is a valid governmental interest.
It
So I
seems
think
too
you would
early to have
address
lunch.
whether that alone can sustain the act in two steps. First, you would ask, if you have an impermissible motive and a permissible one, can we sustain the act based on the based simply on the permissible motive? And I think for the reasons Mr. Francisco said, and we lay out in our brief, that alone, the answer is no under Hunter against Underwood and other cases. Even if you could get just to the data security question, again, you have to ask the question, would this law have been passed by Congress for data security reasons? Because you're being asked to uphold a law based on that single governmental interest. And when you look through the provisions, like the content recommendation algorithm provision, like the
with
covered
enough
company
ketchup,
provisions, the answer is
even
no.
a
And
fish
if you're
stick
still in
is
doubt on
edible.
that,
Okay?
Just go back to the under-inclusiveness problem. What a Congress really worried about
Just
these
as much
very
ketchup as
dramatic
they'll give you.
risks. Leave out an e-commerce site like Temu that has 70 million Americans using it, and every bit the connection.
Does Congress have to go
Ooh, that's
all or
weird,
nothing on
Tom.
that?
I might try that.
It doesn't have to go all or nothing.
They isolate a particular problem, and they might be getting to what you're talking about
Talking
next.
fish.
Who knows?
I love
but
those.
you're
I
really
gotta go
sitting
out
up there
there
and
again.
saying Congress would not pass the divestiture law if data security were the only interest.
So I'm saying it would not have
That's
passed
so
this
great.
divestiture
I would love
law
that, Jim.
If data security were the only interest. It's very curious
I would
why you
love
just
some
single
nice
out
tom yum
TikTok
soup.
alone
Yum,
and
yum,
not
yum,
other
tom,
companies
tom,
with
tom,
tens of millions of people
I'm gonna try
having
it
their
just
own
for
data taken, in the process of engaging with those websites, and equally, if not more, available to Chinese control. So I'm not trying to say that Congress has to do everything at once. I'm trying to say that once you've concluded that content manipulation, for the reasons I've said, as a matter of our history and tradition, has to be impermissible.
Is there another site like this one that covers half the American population?
I don't think, just by way of sheer numbers, Justice Sotomayor, that the answer has to be no. But 70 million seems like a lot.
170 million is a lot, but put that aside and then go to the next question, which is, how many of these sites
This
have
has just been a food
all
coma
of the
show.
data collection mechanisms that TikTok has? From what I understand from the briefs, not only is it getting your information, it's asking, and most people give it permission to access your contact list, whether that contact list has permitted them to or not. So they can now have data about all of your contacts and anything you say about them. How many other sites gather information by keystrokes to be able to do voice and finger ID information if they choose? And there's a whole lot of data stuff that was discussed in the brief that I don't think any other website gathers. So wouldn't this be a unique site? If I viewed the evidence that way, how would this be under-inclusive?
Justice Sotomayor, I don't think a lot of the suppositions you're making actually bear out. And as Justice Gorsuch was pointing out, one of the obviously the real challenges in this case is it comes to you without an ordinary trial record compiled and all the rest. So we have only limited amounts of information. But absolutely, these other websites are taking much the same kind of information, if not more. And as to the contact list thing, I think that points out one other aspect of this. That is voluntary decision by an American user to share that information. In the Riley case.
But not informed. And
well,
even if
that could be
informed,
solved.
but
If you don't think it's informed, that could be solved by
no,
a
that
warrant
can't
or
be,
exposure.
because for the United States, the threat of using that information is what is at issue. It's not whether the user thinks it's okay. It's whether the U.S. believes that it could put sites at issue. But let me ask you one last question and fundamental question. Assuming that content neutral data collection concerns were is one of Congress's provisions, divest because of this. Why can't we separate that out from how we analyze the algorithm question? And couldn't we sever the two provisions?
At least,
to say,
Tom. Kettle, at least.
Divestiture is right, but you can't force them not to discuss algorithm.
Well, I think the reason why you can't do that was Mr. Francisco explained. I thought I'd direct you to a case like Hunter against Underwood and just analogize it to this situation. If what you had is the government saying,
yes.
we are shutting down TikTok or
I've been
requiring
reading
divestiture for
Jackie's
two
posts.
reasons. One, because we think it helps the Democratic Party too much. And number two, because we're concerned about data. I think that first interest would be a poison pill. That would be an impermissible, or because we think there's too much pro-Catholic content on TikTok. I think there are some interests that are just so constitutionally verboten that I think that just makes the act unconstitutional, and you can't go looking for other interests. You send it back to Congress. Look, if you want to pass a data security law free and clear of this impermissible interest, you go ahead and do it. So, can I say one other thing, Justice Sotomayor, just because I think it is also telling here that even if you didn't buy that poison pill argument and you just asked whether Congress would have passed this law, something else that I think you might notice is even if all this act goes into effect and the law goes through, TikTok gets to keep all the data. So wouldn't the data security law require them to expunge that data or get rid of it or something? I mean, it's a very weird law if you're just looking at it through a data security lens, and maybe Congress could do better.
Mr. Fisher, often we require divestiture for antitrust reasons, for example. And as I take it, your argument here, and we don't think of those as normally implicating the First Amendment interests of users or people who might speak or associate with editors. And the difference here is, as I understand it, in your mind, that this law is motivated by a content-based interest. Is that a fair summary?
I think that, and the only thing I would add to it is just the prior step, which it is regulating the speech itself for content-based reasons.
Yeah,
yes.
And we don't do that in the antitrust area, but
exactly.
You say this law does. Okay.
Exactly.
And it does on the covert content manipulation side. Do you think that's a compelling interest or not? Forget about the tailoring for a moment.
No, my point is that preventing content manipulation, whether it's covert or not,
is simply not
impermissible if what you mean by content manipulation are the kinds of interests the government is saying, like undermining trust in our leaders, undermining trust in democracy. That's Whitney and Abrams, and like those cases.
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
So,
just a couple more. I'm sorry. I'll finish up real quick. And so that would take us to the tailoring question. And there you say disclosure and alerting Americans that there is covert content manipulation possibility, putting aside the data collection part of it.
Yeah.
Telling Americans that there is covert content manipulation going on in TikTok, or at least it's possible. And the government says that's just simply not enough. And the D.C. Circuit did too, and I wanted to give you a chance to respond to that.
Right, so I think that's the only aspect of the governmental interest that could be permissible, the covert part. And my answer, as you just said, is disclosure solves that problem. And you have a law, a long-standing law, which we haven't talked about yet today, that gives you that example. And again, under a history and tradition test, you look at not just precedent, but laws and traditions of our country. Look at the Foreign Agent Registration Act. Passed in the run-up to World War II, and the concern was Americans would be controlled by foreign agents to speak and advocate certain causes.
We didn't ban them.
We did not ban them. All you did is require, Congress, all Congress did was require disclosure.
Certainly I wasn't around for that.
Oh, interesting.
On the secret evidence point, I'm concerned about the government's attempt to lodge secret
we have our
evidence
own
in this
propaganda
case
arm
without providing any mechanism for opposing counsel.
If you're going to apply the foreign ownership kind of threat to democracy, we've got some examples.
To read in counsel, and that other countries, including our allies,
disclose your algorithm. I don't know. Let's figure out that kind of stuff. That should work in everybody's interest, frankly, across platforms.
So there was a flurry of motion practice.
Make that a
whether or
law.
not the government could rely on classified evidence. Those motions were never resolved.
Allow the ability to reset your own algorithm.
We're going to decide this case
That's a
solely
button.
based on the public record.
That's a fucking
and my understanding
button.
is that's how it comes to this court. But if the court were ever
and I get that that's what's undermining the profitability of data. I get it. Well, make a choice.
They have regulated this area.
What are you going to
Like an area
choose?
that Congress might want to pay attention to, given the increased appeals to secret evidence that the government has made in recent years.
Let's label shit,
last
okay,
question for
and
you.
let
Could
people
the new
make their own
administration,
decisions.
After January 20th,
I'm not actually
Mr.
asking for
Francisco suggested
censorship.
that it might
I
be
just want a
able to
fucking label when you
extend
know
the
something's
deadline,
opinion
even
or
though
whatever. Like,
if you
there
were to
can be
lose
labels.
here by January 19th. Is that possible?
Yeah, disclose the algorithm and frankly let people opt out of an algorithm.
The Solicitor General, but
it certainly is. I thought maybe
I
I'd
get
give you a
it. It's
chance,
not
too.
the point. That's the point. That's the money shot. I get it.
70 days unless extended.
Well,
unless that time runs.
either
I'm not sure
stand
you're
up
talking
and
about
do
an extension
something
anymore.
or
There's ex post
whatever,
facto
you
law
know.
that kind of does this stuff.
Thank you.
What is
I
the
take you
government
back, Mr.
committed
Fisher.
to?
Let's say I
Exactly.
agree with
Questions
you
for
that if
Congress.
you're
What is
talking
the
about
government
content
committed to? Is
manipulation,
the
that's an
government committed to
inherently
protecting
content-based rationale for
the national
acting.
security of this
so
country?
If Congress had passed a law that says we hate the content manipulation that TikTok is doing, that's strict scrutiny land, and I don't know that the government can do that, however important and the interest. But that's not what Congress is doing here, and this is the same kinds of questions that I asked Mr. Francisco, because if let's take it as a given that Congress actually can do whatever it wants with respect to a wholly foreign corporation or a foreign government, and so Congress could act with the intent to interfere with the content manipulation that a foreign corporation is doing. And so now we're in this strange world where we're saying they can't act with respect to TikTok. They could act with respect to ByteDance. Why isn't this Congress acting with respect to ByteDance in the sense that all it's doing is saying ByteDance has to divest, and then TikTok can go about its business, use whatever algorithm it wants, use whatever content moderation policies it wants, just like everybody else does, choosing from everything that's available on the open market.
And I have
So
fish
let me
videos.
answer that question in two parts. From the perspective of the creator Americans who want to use this platform to speak to other
I
Americans.
appreciate
so
the
the first thing
exception.
is what the act does, as you said, Justice Kagan, is prevent us from working with a application that is owned by ByteDance that uses this algorithm. Well, that's exactly what we want to do. That's our editor and publisher of choice that we think best disseminates our speech.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you is if you just assume a world without TikTok, that where it's only ByteDance, and you were trying to say, well, we really want to work with ByteDance, and Congress was saying, we think ByteDance presents national security interests, and they don't have First Amendment rights, they're just a foreign corporation. I think that in that case, the government, I mean, tell me if you think this is wrong. It just doesn't matter that you have creators who want to work with ByteDance, because ByteDance is a foreign corporation with no First Amendment rights. Is that what you're contesting?
So that is what I'm contesting. So you said two things, though, so I could be clear. There's two aspects. Do we have a First Amendment right to work with a foreign company or even a foreign country to publish our speech? And then there's a national security part that you put into that, which goes to the justification. Forget that. Yes, let's do that. So if that is right, Justice Kagan, then American creators have no right to make documentaries with the BBC. They can't work with Al Jazeera if Congress wants to prevent that. Any number of other publications that are state-owned wholly or partially. And even under Lamont, remember, where you're not even creating speech, you're just listening.
Exactly.
You know, that was speech from China. That the court said you have a First Amendment right to receive.
So would I be right to say that your position is that because of the users who want to associate and want to partner with this foreign corporation,
their
the
website
foreign
probably
corporation
does,
ends up having, in your view, the exact same First Amendment rights as your users do. In other words, it's irrelevant that the foreign corporation doesn't have First Amendment rights.
I don't think it's irrelevant, because you could imagine a situation where no American distributor or speaker wants to work with that. But let me put it to you this way. The Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx, has no First Amendment standing on its own in America. But if a bookstore wants to sell that publication, I don't think Congress can prevent it from doing so.
Well, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm fine.
No.
I'm good.
Okay. So I want to press you a little bit on the distinction, because in Lamont, the prohibition worked directly on the American. Like, you have to specifically request this information that comes. This is working kind of as Justice Kagan's questions were pressing you. This is working on ByteDance. It's not saying to your creators, you can't post on ByteDance. That's indirectly going to happen if ByteDance chooses itself not to permit TikTok to walk away with the code. So does that matter, that distinction between Lamont and this case?
No, for two reasons. One, under the Sorrell case, you look to not just the law itself, but its practical operation. And the practical operation is prevent us from working with ByteDance. So that's one answer. And you bring up Lamont, and Lamont's actually a very important case, I'm sure you all recognize here. It's important to look not just at the court's opinion, but look at the briefing in that case. The government itself never came in and argued there's no right to receive this information.
I think it's basically
that's the sort of greater argument.
We are already at the point where our data is accessible by many, many entities. It is now time to acknowledge that and put some guardrails in that make sense. That's my thought.
This argument because we think it's so contrary to history and tradition. All we're going to argue is the
we can't worry about the data collection at this point per se. We should think about what are the guardrails in order to help protect people's rights.
Argument the government was even willing to make in this
I don't know.
There was no argument that Americans didn't have the
reasonable.
right to hear that speech.
What about, so I think this goes to Justice Gorsuch's questions about antitrust divestiture. Let's say that for antitrust reasons, or let's even say
like
not
this,
for that. Let's
to me,
say
provides
for,
a beautiful opportunity to test some of those guardrails, like opting out of algorithms and things.
To divest in the Washington
I'm fascinated.
Post.
I think that's a great idea. This could be a test case.
Let's say that neither Bezos nor the Post challenges that, but let's say that you represent clients who really like the Post as it was, who really want to keep receiving the Post, who really want to publish op-eds in the Post.
Yeah.
Would you have standing? Like, what kind of a claim would you be making there?
I believe so, Justice Barrett, and the court has cited Lamont in other cases in more recent years to say we've recognized the right of American listeners to receive information from others. And remember, even that is that's only a small part of the argument I'm making on behalf of the creators. I don't mean to diminish Mr. Francisco's arguments on behalf of the company and ByteDance, but the core speech in front of you in this case are the videos and other forms of communication.
It seems
that
to me
like
China
are posting
is
focused
on the commercial part of the competition. China needs customers, right? To exist, they need customers.
No, I think
they're
it's
not
possible.
isolationists.
I don't think we should.
So of course they're going to collect data that enables them to manipulate customer decisions or sentiments about an administration. Yes, they can do that. You know what I mean? Like, that's not surprising to me.
Able to assert full-throated First
But I think their intention is to manipulate markets.
Get you to the strict scrutiny, and then the arguments
and shortcut IP.
And I think
that's what I think.
You asked about, do we have
two major strategies. I'm not
idea
smart about this stuff, so forgive me. I'm speaking out of my butt.
Once you're in
but
strict scrutiny,
that's what I think.
Regulating the content because you don't think it's going to be pro-American enough or it's going to be too pro-foreign interest is just verboten under the First Amendment. That's the history and tradition. And Justice Kavanaugh, when you asked about the broadcast cases, they're grounded not just in scarcity, but they're grounded in scarcity in a particular way. And it has to do with the absolute need Congress has for licensing in a world of scarce resources. And so that's the very small
and there is some pushing. I could
wouldn't extend to cable television.
Oren and I both experience where you have young people being forced certain content, trauma-based content. We saw a lot of that over the last couple of years.
You are not going to find it.
In particular.
So
there's a lot of conversations to be had, I guess.
If you're not in a world of scarcity where licensing is impossible,
I mean,
you cannot give the government, and in this
I'm not standing up for China's bullshit, spying bullshit, and their oppression of their own people. That's bullshit.
Because it is so hand in hand with viewpoint.
But I mean,
as I said earlier, any number of owners of big media enterprises, whether they be Americans or foreign citizens,
it's time to say the horse has already left the barn. Let's figure out how to get the horse, near the barn.
On behalf of our creator
let's focus on what's the what are we committed to as a government?
Well, look, just go post somewhere else.
If we're committed to the company and the bottom line,
in the Wall Street Journal,
or we're committed to what is going to protect
just like here to say residents of this country. Or some other platform, not just TikTok. TikTok has a distinct
Get 'em
editorial
near
and
the door.
publicational perspective.
You're not going to get them back in the
particularly benefits
barn.
people like my clients who are not famous people. They're not actors from Hollywood who have a lot
Save
of
the
people
baby,
following them.
save
They're
the baby.
ordinary American citizens whose content that they create on the platform gets privileged by way of the quality of that content. And
anything.
that's what's so powerful about the platform. So whether you're an ordinary American citizen or, I might add, whether you're a presidential candidate in our last election, if you want to reach new and different audiences, TikTok is the place people go.
This may not make any difference for constitutional purposes.
Well, but it's
just
TikTok
out of
one
curiosity,
day and
I'd
something
like you
else
to
the other.
explain
God,
what
right?
the practical consequences would likely be for your clients if TikTok went dark, as Mr. Francisco put it. There, I assume, is a great demand for what TikTok
there you go,
provides.
GP. Yep.
And if
Chinese women
TikTok
can
was
access
no
free
longer
abortions. Again,
there
nothing is a
to
monolith.
provide what
But there
your
is a lot of
clients
oppression
really
of speech
want,
and political
is there a
dissidence
reason to
in
doubt that
China.
Some other social media company
That's
would
a
not
that's a
jump
fact.
in
And so it's
take
okay to
advantage of
acknowledge
this
that,
very
but then
lucrative
also
market?
say, what is
There
there?
are two reasons, Justice Alito.
You know.
One is many of the declarations
know.
from
I
my
just,
clients
you know,
actually
I don't-
explain they've tried on other platforms to generate the kind of audience and engagement they've been able to on TikTok, and they've fallen dramatically.
Yeah, I know they haven't so far, and
I think
I'm just,
it's a-
you know,
it's
I'm
a-
just
it's
wondering
kind of
whether
a-
this is like
You really,
somebody's attachment
this
to
our
an
government
old article
needs
of
to
clothing.
choose
I mean, I really love this
what they're
going to
stand for.
because I've been wearing this old shirt.
Is
but
it
I could go out and buy
helping people make good
something
decisions?
exactly like that, but no, I like
Or
the
is
old
it
shirt. Is that what we have here, or is there some reason to think
corporate
that
overlords?
only ByteDance has this? The ByteDance has devised this magical algorithm that all of the geniuses at Meta
Indeed, they
and
did,
all of
Carla,
these other social media
which I
companies,
think
they
is why
couldn't-
we're here.
No matter, they put their minds to it, they couldn't come up with this magical thing.
I think empirically, other companies have been trying for a few years to catch up with TikTok and replicate it and have been very unsuccessful. And so that ought to tell you something. And so just imagine the algorithm here as a collection of thousands of editors. You know, imagine the floors of an office building being filled with a collection of editors. You could imagine a situation where that collection of genius that is on a particular floor cannot be replicated by another group of people. And that's kind of what you have here.
All right, I understand that.
Thank you, counsel. Justice Thomas? Anything further, Justice Alito?
Yeah, one other question. I'm intrigued by your Mount Healthy Hunter versus Underwood argument. I mean, maybe you're right, but Mount Healthy arose in an entirely different context where you're trying to get to an employer's motivation. Hunter versus Underwood involved an extreme situation where the court looked at the records of a state constitutional convention and came to the conclusion, apparently, that racism was the only motivation for what was done. But it does seem to me to be potentially quite unworkable and contrary to what we've generally said about legislative intent to apply the Mount Healthy framework to a congressional enactment. Do you recognize or do you acknowledge that that would be very difficult? Because when an act of Congress is passed, there could be more than 250 different motivations for the votes that were cast by the members.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And in Hunter, the court actually engaged with that problem to some degree. And what Hunter said is, to avoid that problem, we're going to look just to two things. One is the state's brief, which I'd say is the Solicitor General's brief by comparison here, and the text of the law. And here, that's the only thing I need to rely on to get you to the place that they wouldn't have announced.
Well, it gets you to the place that this was part of what motivated Congress. But why does it get
stop
you
it.
home?
Stop
Well,
it with the
Particularly when there's a
Skynet.
severability clause in this act.
It can't,
You can't
be only
handle
part
that.
of it. It has to be enough to sustain the entire act, or at least the parts that you wouldn't sever from the act. And so I think the reason why is because it's not just the content recommendation algorithm part that can be theoretically, I guess, severed out. It's also the covered company provisions, and it's just the whole approach of the statute that is based on content, not on data security.
All right, thank you.
So, okay.
Justice Sotomayor?
Save it for the SG.
Justice Gorsuch? Justice Kavanaugh? Justice Jackson?
One quick question. You repeatedly say that from
Hi,
your perspective,
gal.
the government's motivation is that the content
You go
might
out
be
there
too
and play with those
anti-American or too
babies.
pro-China, et cetera.
Build
So that's
a
why you
snow
think this is a
person.
content-based restriction.
Build
But I
a
guess I'm
snow
curious
person.
if you would say the same thing if the government had
Put a
articulated its rationale
carrot where
as
there no
saying,
should be.
our motivation is to limit foreign foreign
Build a
interference
snow
in
person.
American social media platforms or
Make
discourse.
some snow
Isn't that a different
angels.
motivation
I
from the
wouldn't say-
standpoint of how we characterize this?
I agree, but then the question I would ask if the government said that, which I think kind of in the reply brief, maybe the government does say that, is that how on earth are you then serving a national security interest?
Oh,
Because
God.
all you're doing
Oh,
is
God.
just saying,
I did a
we
fencing
don't like
class
a
once.
foreign,
That's so fucking
country,
hard. That is one of the hardest
rearranging
sports
cat and dance
ever.
videos. Like, it's hard to come in
Ever.
and make a national security argument. So the only way
Bite
you
me.
get to
I'm telling you
national
right now,
security,
that
which
was
is
the-
government's own
that
argument,
kicked
is
my
to look at the
fucking
substance
ass.
that's being rearranged and say we don't like the way the substance is going to be rearranged and curated differently.
Thank you.
Thank you, counsel.
It's a creepy robot loading parts for engine covers on the
Prelotter.
assembly line.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, the Chinese government's control of TikTok poses a grave threat to national security.
BRB.
No one disputes that the PRC seeks to undermine U.S. interests by amassing vast quantities of sensitive data about Americans and by engaging in covert influence operations. And no one disputes that the PRC pursues those goals by compelling companies like ByteDance to secretly turn over data and carry out PRC directives. Those realities mean that the Chinese government could weaponize TikTok at any time to harm the United States. TikTok collects unprecedented amounts of personal data, and as Justice Sotomayor noted, it's not just about the 170 million American users, but also about their non-user contacts who might not even be engaging with the platform. That data would be incredibly valuable to the PRC. For years, the Chinese government has sought to build detailed profiles about Americans, where we live and work, who our friends and coworkers are, what our interests are, and what our vices are. TikTok's immense data set would give the PRC a powerful tool for harassment, recruitment, and espionage. On top of that, the Chinese government's control over TikTok gives it a potent weapon for covert influence operations. And my friends are wrong to suggest that Congress was seeking to suppress specific types of content or specific types of viewpoints. Instead, the national security harm arises from the very fact of a foreign adversary's capacity to secretly manipulate the platform to advance its geopolitical goals in whatever form that kind of covert operation might take. The Act addresses the threat of foreign adversary control with laser-like focus. It requires only divestiture of TikTok to prevent Chinese government control. And that divestiture remedy follows a long tradition of barring foreign control of U.S. communications channels and other critical infrastructure. So no matter what level of First Amendment scrutiny applies, this act is valid because it's narrowly tailored to address compelling national security threats. Now, my friend Mr. Fisher just emphasized, and I acknowledge, that millions of Americans enjoy expressing themselves on this platform. But the important thing to recognize is that the Act leaves all of that speech unrestricted once TikTok is freed from foreign adversary control. The First Amendment does not bar Congress from taking that critical and targeted step to protect our nation's security. I welcome the court's questions.
Is there any difference between content manipulation by a non-U.S. company as opposed to a U.S. company? I didn't hear Mr. Fisher make a distinction between the two.
Yes, and I think the important thing to recognize is that the Act here is targeting covert content manipulation by a foreign adversary nation. Now, I understand my friends to say...
What difference does that make?
The difference is that there is no protected First Amendment right for a foreign adversary to exploit its control over its speech platform.
The difference between covert and non-covert.
So I think that Congress's concern with the covert operation was that a foreign adversary could effectively weaponize this platform behind the scenes in order to achieve any number of geopolitical goals. Here are some of the examples that come to mind. One of the pages out of the playbook here is for a foreign adversary to simply try to get Americans arguing with one another to create chaos and distraction in order to weaken the United States as a general matter and distract from any activities that the foreign adversary might want to conduct on the world stage.
What do you mean by covert, though? I mean, does covert just mean it's hard to figure out how the algorithm works? Because we could say that about every algorithm.
No, the covert nature of it comes from the fact that it's not apparent that the PRC is the one behind the scenes pulling the strings here and deciding exactly what content is going to be made to appear on the site. And another way that the
It's just because we don't know that China's behind it? That's what covert means?
Well, I think
it doesn't have anything to do with the difficulty of figuring out what the algorithm is doing. It's just because people don't know that China is pulling the strings. That's what covert means?
What it means is that Americans are on this platform thinking that they are speaking to one another, and this recommendation engine that is apparently so valuable is organically directing their speech to each other. And what is covert is that the PRC, a foreign adversary nation, is instead exploiting a vulnerability in the system.
Well, if that's all it means, that like people don't know that China's behind it, like everybody now knows that China is behind it.
No, but it's the specific content that's being manipulated would be unapparent. And so I think
that's true of every search engine. I mean, you can take any of these algorithms, whether it's X or whether it's you name it. What are the new ones? Blue Sky. I mean, none of these are apparent, right? You get what you get, and you think that's puzzling, and it's all a little bit of a black box. So you can't just mean it's a black box, it's covert. They're all black boxes. And if you just mean what's covert is the fact that there's China behind it, I mean, honestly, really, like everybody does know now that there's China behind it. So I just don't get what this covert word does for you.
I think the problem with just saying as a general matter, China has this capability and might at some point be able to exercise it and manipulate the platform is it doesn't put anyone on notice of when that influence operation is actually happening, and therefore it doesn't guard against the national security harm from the operation itself.
Isn't that a pretty paternalistic point of view? I mean, don't we normally assume that the best remedy for problematic speech is counter speech? And TikTok says it could even live with a disclaimer on its website saying this can be covertly manipulated by China. In case anybody were left in doubt after today about that possibility. So you're saying that won't work because?
That won't work because it is such a generic, generalized disclosure that it wouldn't put anyone reasonably on notice about when it's actually happening. And the example I've been thinking about is...
argument is that the average American won't be able to figure out that the cat feed he's getting on TikTok could be manipulated, even though there's a disclosure saying it could be manipulated.
But imagine if you walked into a store and it had a sign that said 1 of 1 million products in this store causes cancer. That is not going to put you on notice about what product is actually jeopardizing your health.
Jane.
And I think that's roughly equivalent to the type of disclosure they're contemplating here. They brought up the example of the
my
Foreign
arthritis
Agents
has gotten to
Registration
the
Act.
point where my shoulders are not good, my wrists, everything's not strong enough.
Wouldn't that be true for all social media companies, for all content? I mean, every editor, every newspaper in its editorial room makes decisions about what it's going to run and how it's going to say it. And every algorithm has preferences, whether it's domestic or foreign. And nobody really knows exactly when those editorial decisions are being made or how.
I miss yoga,
but they're generally aware, and we think that's enough.
Can't really. I mean, I can do modified, sure, but it's just not the same.
When a foreign adversary has control of that kind of mechanism and a speech platform in the United States, it could weaponize that platform to harm United States interests. And one of the key ways that the PRC flexes this muscle.
Yes, we know when we're walking into a cancer place, but we don't.
We're not arguing about.
We don't not walk in. Do you like the cat butt that you have there?
And so
Sam's doing a great job with his cat camera.
You began by saying the cure for concerning speech is counter speech. Here, I dispute the premise that Congress was specifically concerned about any particular subject or any particular viewpoint. It wanted to close off the capability of a foreign government. But in any event, it's very hard to engage in counter speech when you don't know because someone is secretly manipulating the platform behind the scenes. And in particular, what the PRC has the capability to do is simply silence American voices.
With a newspaper owned by a foreign company and a foreign government? You wouldn't know when it's exercising editorial discretion about this article or that article or how it's doing it. So maybe you just need to shut down the Oxford University Press in America, or you pick it. Any other foreign-owned Politico?
No, I don't think that's. I don't know who that was.
Germany.
It was the
So
that would all be okay on your theory,
That's the
so long as
lawyer,
Congress
right?
designates that country a foreign adversary?
We are not asking the court to articulate bright line rules to govern all kinds
I
of
understand that,
hypothetical
but
situations.
I am testing your argument.
Yes, and what I want to acknowledge is that sometimes the court has recognized that a speaker-based preference might reflect a content-based preference. And in the context of ownership of a newspaper, for example, in part because a newspaper is a one-way channel of communication and is generally understood to represent to some extent its publisher's views, maybe the court would more readily infer that a regulation targeting that is actually aiming to target content. But I don't think the court could draw the same
I'm not talking
conclusion
about
here.
the compelling interest or any of that. I'm
Right.
talking about the tailoring. And you're saying we have no alternative but to stop this speech altogether. We can't rely on disclosure. But you say that wouldn't apply to Politico or to the Oxford University Press.
We're not going to tell you what.
In the circumstance where you have a
Just
newspaper
trust
that
us.
is understood to reflect its publisher's views, then you might think that disclosure would be a more adequate remedy there because it's not just holding itself out as a forum for speech between other people. I think social media platforms do raise distinct interests in this regard because what people think when they're engaging with TikTok is that it's organically feeding them videos based on the recommendation
kitty
engine.
toes.
And if actually
They're so
China is
cute.
behind the scenes engaging in this kind of covert operation, it does prevent a distinct national security risk. Of course, the other big difference with the newspaper is it's not likely to be collecting sensitive personal information about 170 million plus people and then having the capacity to send that back to a foreign adversary.
General Prelogar, can I? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, did I understand you to say a few minutes ago that one problem that ByteDance might be through TikTok trying to get Americans to argue with each other?
That it might be just trying to
If they
foment
do, I say they're winning.
disruption or dissent. That might very well be true, Mr. Chief Justice. And I think the point I'm trying to make is that China is a foreign adversary nation that looks for every opportunity
just tried
it
to
has
start
weaken
cleaning
the
his
United
butt
States
and ended
to
up
try to
rolling
threaten our
back.
national security. And if it has control over this key communications channel, it's hard to predict ex ante exactly how it's going to use that as a tool to harm our interests. But we know it's going to try.
Yes,
First and
Politico is
foremost,
owned by a
seeking
truly
to get the
awful
data of
right-wing
these American
man.
users,
Yes.
which would be of a piece of all of the activity the PRC has already undertaken to breach our laws. Hack OPM, for example, and exfiltrate the background files and security clearances of 20 million government employees. The breach of Equifax to get sensitive financial data, Anthem to get sensitive healthcare data. We know that the PRC has a voracious appetite to get its hands on as much information about Americans as possible, and that creates a potent weapon here because the PRC could command that ByteDance comply with any request it gives to obtain that data that's in the hands of the U.S. subsidiary.
Thank you.
General Prelogar.
It's a very good question, Max. It's not dumb at all. It's very good.
TikTok.
Well,
had
she's the
no
government
connection
lawyer, so she's
whatsoever
doing
with
her
any foreign government. It was
her-
owned instead
what is
by
it?
an immensely rich multinational
Aggressive
corporation,
defense or something.
and Congress
Something like
concluded
that.
that this
She's not an airhead. She's a very good
multinational
lawyer, but
corporation
sometimes
really
she's on the
has it
wrong
in for
side
the
of an
United
issue,
States
right? Like,
and
or
is
she,
gonna
we won't
use
agree with
this
what she
extremely popular
actually
platform
saying,
to do
but
everything it
she's a
can
pretty good
to
lawyer.
undermine the United States in all the ways in which you think that TikTok
The argument might be really dumb, but
may pursue at the direction of the PRC. Would that be the same case?
I think there would be a first-order question of whether the multinational corporation itself has First Amendment rights.
All right, it's an American corporation.
So if it were an American corporation, I think that, and Congress disagreed with the viewpoints or content the corporation would display, obviously that's a direct regulation of protected speech and it would trigger strict scrutiny. I think that's different in kind from what Congress was worried about here, which was not regulating speech as such, but instead regulating foreign adversary control.
So your argument depends on the fact that what is at bottom here is the People's Republic of China using TikTok. That's what your argument depends on. If this were an American corporation, it'd be an entirely different thing.
Exactly. And the reason we know the statute is different is because all of the same speech that's happening on TikTok could happen post-divestiture. The Act doesn't regulate that at all. So it's not saying you can't have pro-China speech, you can't have anti-American speech. It's not regulating the algorithm. TikTok, if it were able to do so,
That's
could
fair.
use precisely the same algorithm to display the same content by the same users. All the Act is doing is trying to surgically remove the ability of a foreign adversary nation to get our data and to be able to exercise control over the platform.
General Prelogar. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted you to respond to Mr. Fisher's argument about the rights of Americans to receive information, say, from the PRC or anyone else, and that even if ByteDance did not itself have First Amendment rights, that Americans would have a First Amendment right to receive that information in the Lamont sense.
Yes, so I think that Lamont reflected the principle that there can be a right of American listeners to receive information,
yes,
and if Congress is directly regulating that based on disagreement with the speech that's being sent into this country, that's obviously going to trigger
some
heightened
of them won't
scrutiny under
work
the
without
First Amendment.
location, though.
But here, I think the users have to be asserting a different type of interest, because what Congress was safeguarding against was not the ability of TikTok to continue to operate or the users to post content. It was focused only on foreign adversary control. And so the users would have to demonstrate that they have some unqualified First Amendment right to post on a platform that's controlled by a foreign adversary, which could use that access to then threaten our nation's security by gathering data on tens or hundreds of millions of Americans, and also use it for covert influence operations of whatever form. And I don't think there's a First Amendment right to do that.
I was trying to think of whether there's a historical analog here, and this is what I came up with, and you can tell me whether it's fallacious. In the mid-20th century, we were very concerned about the Soviet Union and what the Soviet Union was doing in this country. And the Communist Party of the United States at that time was integrally attached to the Communist
Cambridge
International,
Analytica,
which
people
was
you may know.
essentially a Soviet
Watch that documentary.
operation. Right? So if Congress had said, oh, it's very nice, we can have the Communist Party USA, but it has to divest, it has to completely divorce itself from
Actually,
the
is there a
Comintern
movie
and
specifically
from
about
any
Cambridge
international
Analytica?
ties that it has.
Does anybody know of a
Do
good
you think
documentary
that would have been
specifically about
absolutely
Cambridge
fine?
Analytica?
And so if the answer is yes, it would have been fine, it's just like this case. Or if the answer is no, why is it not like this case?
So I guess I think I would need to know more information about how the international organization is able to exercise control over the American affiliate. And if it had the capacity, for example, to, in an unqualified fashion, gather data from that affiliate in a way that was going to jeopardize our nation's security.
Well, I'm talking more about sort of the content. Let's put the data collection piece of this aside, which seems not very pertinent to my 1950s analog. But, I'm very concerned about the kind of speech that the Communist Party was making in the United States. And it turns out that
Brittany Kaiser, I don't
that
know who that
content
is.
was pretty well scripted someplace else.
I think if it was specifically a concern about the content, then that would trigger heightened scrutiny under the First Amendment. We're not trying to run away from that principle here. Instead, we're making, I think, a narrower argument.
Well, then I think that you're a little bit, I think you've just given your thing away, because content manipulation is a content-based rationale. We think that this foreign government is going to manipulate content in a way that will that concerns us and may very well affect our national security interests. Well, that's exactly what they thought about Communist Party speech in the 1950s, which was being scripted in large part by international organizations or directly by the Soviet Union.
I disagree that the concern with covert content manipulation is itself content-based, or that it looks anything like the kinds of laws this court has previously said are content-based. The court most recently in the city of
I
Austin
think this is
said
going to
you
be the
only
fight
have
of
a
the century,
content-based law
and I
when
personally
Congress is setting
can't wait
out
to see this
discriminate
fencing
against
match.
particular subject matters or particular viewpoints.
I'm going to make it a pay-per-view, and we're going to raise money for
is
orphans.
regulating in the space that involves content in some way. You have to have this motive by Congress to actually want to suppress speech on certain topics or certain viewpoints.
We're going to make sure there's
Here,
no actual
Congress just wants to cut
sabers
the
being
PRC
used.
out of the
Okay,
equation
don't worry.
altogether, and all of the same speech could continue to
I can
happen
only
on the
imagine
platform.
what Biff
it's
means.
like patching up a backdoor vulnerability that the PRC has that we can't totally see around all the corners to imagine how it could use it against our interests, but we know the PRC will do whatever it can to try. And I think that is different in kind from imputing to Congress some motive to specifically get more speech on certain topics or with certain viewpoints. This law was passed by broad bipartisan majorities in both houses of Congress, and our legislators, our legislators.
Okay,
don't
that's a
always
weak.
agree
Okay,
on
now
everything.
you're
I think
getting
it's
weak
unlikely
sauce
that
there,
all of
girl.
them had
Come on
exactly
now.
the same views about what's
That's
good
the
content
excuse?
on TikTok
Come
or
on
what
now.
are good viewpoints. They weren't united on that. What they were united around was the idea that it is a grave threat to our nation if the PRC can itself, behind the scenes, be controlling how this platform operates.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Give me coffee.
Why
Adore you.
doesn't this act classify on the basis of speaker?
I do think that when it comes to the PRC and ByteDance, you could treat this as a speaker-based restriction.
And aren't speaker-based restrictions almost always viewpoint-based restrictions, content-based restrictions?
The court has said it depends. It hasn't applied an inflexible rule that any time you are regulating certain speakers, you are invariably regulating based on content. Instead, the court has said it warrants closer consideration. And here, if you look at the U.S. speakers, TikTok U.S. and the users, none of them are being regulated in a way that suggests it's disagreement with their content. It's all about what our foreign adversary is doing.
It's hard for me to think of situations, maybe they exist, where a classification based on speaker is not viewpoint or content-based restrictions. I mean, somebody says, Joe can't talk anymore. We're going to shut Joe up. And we don't know what he's going to say tomorrow or 2 weeks from now. We don't know what he's going to discuss.
Cool, I want to watch
whatever
that.
he says is bad because Joe is a bad person. I mean,
Chef Andres is down here. I know, he already, I saw the thing where he offered
when it comes
meals.
to a foreign adversary, it's not right to view it that way. And the reason for that, again, is this is a sophisticated adversary nation, and we can't just simplistically say, oh, what the PRC is going to want is to see more pro-China content on this app. As Chief Judge Srinivasan observed, there are various ways that the PRC could try to create some kind of false flag operation and actually promote anti-China content, not to dictate how Americans should think about things, but simply to create some trumped-up justification for a military or economic action that the foreign adversary wants to take against us. And I don't think a concern with trying to ward off that capability.
Why isn't that viewpoint or content still? We don't know what the content's going to be, but we know it, Joe, is bad.
Because I think the better classification is to recognize that what we're trying to prevent is not the specific subject matter, the specific viewpoints, but the technical capability of a foreign adversary nation to use a communications channel.
Well, the great hack is Carol Codwaller. She's also probably pretty good. We could probably do both of those. I'll check them out too. Gals probably watch both of them. I always trust her gut on these.
The word content. And it's kind of hard to avoid the word viewpoint here, isn't it?
I don't dispute that it's related to content, but I don't think it reflects Congress seeking to set out in advance what kind of speech we should have reflecting certain
Watch
views
it, Paul
on certain
Langan.
topics. Instead, it's
We've
about
got a
trying
battle
to close off
over
the vulnerability that our foreign adversary
Elizabeth.
nation could
She's not standing for the right shit right now.
Even if you thought this was content-based, all that means is that we're in strict scrutiny. And as the D.C. Circuit recognized here, we think that this law serves compelling national security concerns that sound in some of the same arguments I'm making here, and that have a long-standing correspondence to history and tradition of trying to prevent foreign control.
And then we get to the question whether there's a less restrictive means. I get that, and whether disclosure might suffice. On the data security point, your friends on the other side make the argument that if that were the concern, Congress could ban TikTok US from sharing data with anyone, and on pains of penalties that would put people in prison and shut the company down in the future, as the government did, for example, with Arthur Anderson.
No, Jim, I didn't see that.
Why
She looked
isn't
very
that a less
upset.
restrictive means available?
So I was surprised to hear Petitioner offer that up today, because there was a long course of discussion between the executive branch and ByteDance and TikTok leading up to Congress's enactment of this act that spanned over 4 years, an extensive conversation about what limitations could be placed to protect Americans' data. And it was never a suggestion that there would be any way to create a true firewall that would prevent the U.S. subsidiary from sharing data with the corporate parent. And the reason for that sounds in the technological features of this application.
No, I think
there
BIF
can be no
isn't
reasonable
a
dispute
verb.
that the source
I
code
don't think it's a
development
noun.
and the maintenance
It's a
of
verb.
this algorithm rests in China, which is why China
I think
has
Carl is
sought
going
to try
to
to control
BIF
export
GP.
restrictions with respect to the algorithm. And what that means is you need
I guess
substantial
is the
data
sound it
flows
makes when
between
you
the companies in order to continue to modify that algorithm, refine it, and so forth. So I don't think that that was an option ever on the table, including with respect to the proposed national security agreement that was insufficient in protecting our data privacy and security concerns.
That didn't come across enough in the briefs.
GP, now we get down to brass fucking tacks, all right?
Data protection.
I'm really doing this
as
to get under your
opposed to
motherfucking
content,
skins.
Content control. I think it's hard to get around the post-divestiture provision that says you can't do business with them on the algorithm, because that very much is content-based. It's a content-based restriction. But what you're saying is you can't do it for a data control reason, meaning that you can't really run their algorithm without sharing the very data that we are concerned about as a threat, correct?
That's right, Justice Sotomayor, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can look at the specific terms of the National Security Agreement that ByteDance itself proposed. The relevant definition of the accepted data is at JA 239 to 240, and it references categories of information that would, of necessity, technological necessity and business necessity, have to flow back to China. And the relevant categories are in the sealed appendix, but I would really encourage the court to look this up because it's eye-opening. It is at the Court of Appeals sealed appendix 249 to 252 and 254. If you look at that information, it was a wealth of data about Americans that was going to have to go back to China in order for the platform to just continue its basic operations. And there's a legitimate commercial justification for that, but it creates this gaping vulnerability in the system because once that data is in China, the PRC can demand that ByteDance turn it over and keep that assistance secret. And the one
Watch
final
out
point
for
on
a
this is that ByteDance
butthole
was not a
because
trusted
it
partner
could very
here.
well
It wasn't a
show up.
company
I'm
that
very
the United
sorry.
States could simply expect
Wait,
to
Court of
comply
Appeals
with any
secret what?
requirements in good faith. And there was actual factual evidence to show that even during a period of time when the company was representing that it had walled off the U.S. data and it was protected, there was a well-publicized incident where ByteDance in China surveilled U.S. journalists using their location data. This is the protected U.S. data in order to try to figure out who was leaking information from the company to those journalists.
General, you want us to look at that, and you get to look at it, but your friends on the other side don't get to look at it. That doesn't seem fair.
That's the sealed appendix, Mr. Chief Justice, so it's their information. They can look at it. It's just under seal to protect their proprietary business information.
General, so I want to go back to the discussion about content discrimination, and we're going to shut Joe up. Here, it seems to me like we are saying to ByteDance, we want to shut you up. And so let's say that I think that that is content discrimination based on speaker. Tell me if I think that, tell me if I have to conclude that it is also speaker-based discrimination and content-based discrimination for TikTok.
No, it is not. And the reason for that is because it would be an anomalous principle to say that an entity outside the United States that can't assert its own First Amendment rights can somehow manufacture that right through the expediency of forming a U.S. subsidiary, especially one that it wholly controls.
So you don't have to stand on that argument that you were having with Justice Alito and Justice Gorsuch to still have your point about content discrimination.
That's right. And I think if you're
Sealed
focusing in
appeals
on the
court
relevant
appendix.
U.S. entities here, TikTok U.S. and the users themselves, this act isn't regulating them in any way. It's not trying to dictate the algorithm that TikTok U.S. can use. And in fact, Congress, I think, was doing everything it could to preserve access to TikTok in the United States in recognition that Americans enjoy expressing themselves and building community on the site.
One last quick question. Sorry, just one last quick question. Justice Gorsuch had asked your friends on the other side whether the new administration on January 20th could extend the deadline. What's your position on that?
So I think it tees up a statutory interpretation question of whether there can be an extension after the time period for divestiture has lapsed. I would think the court might start with its decision in the Hawley Frontier case, which did recognize the ability to get an extension after a lapse like that.
So it's your position that they could?
We have not run it to ground, in part because it's simply not presented here, and I'm not prepared to take a position on that statutory interpretation question. I do want to emphasize, though, that my friends have pointed to January 19th, or 9 days from now, as a moment when TikTok might go dark. At the outset, of course, Congress was hoping to prompt a divestiture, but I think the more important thing to focus on now is that even if that were to happen, Congress specifically anticipated it and provided authority to lift these restrictions as soon as there's a qualified divestiture. And the reason for that is because foreign adversaries do not willingly give up their control over this mass communications channel in the United States. And I think Congress expected we might see something like a game of chicken, ByteDance saying, we can't do it, China will never let us do it. But when push comes to shove and these restrictions take effect, I think it will fundamentally change the landscape with respect to what ByteDance is willing to consider. And it might be just the jolt that Congress expected the company would need to actually move forward with the divestiture process.
Biff.
So it's not irrevocable.
That's an interesting point, and I hope Mr. Francisco or Mr. Fisher, whoever's delivering the rebuttal, will address it. So if we were to affirm and TikTok were forced to cease operations on January 19th, you say that there could be divestiture after that point, and TikTok could again begin to operate
he's
the
not.
way
He's not listening.
That's exactly right. There's nothing permanent or irrevocable that happens on January 19th. And I think that Congress might have thought that we've been in a situation here where a foreign adversary is doing whatever it can to just not comply. It's hoping the United States is going to blink first through our court system or through the executive branch getting cold feet about enforcing the law. But Congress set a deadline, and I think it thought that deadline would have a forcing function.
Well, let me ask you a question about your effort to draw a distinction between
he's pretty cozy right there.
Speech. So suppose
but
that,
he refuses
the
to
People's
perform
Republic of
for the
China
camera.
Funds a movie, and there is an entity in the United States, a U.S. corporation, that thinks, wow, this is a great movie. And while the PRC would not have a First Amendment right to show it in the United States, would you say that the American company would not have a First Amendment right to do that because whatever expression there is in that movie, it's the PRC's expression, it's not their expression?
No, I wouldn't make that argument, and I want to be really careful.
I thought that was the argument that was being made, no?
No. So our argument is that this is not a direct regulation of protected speech in the first place, or at most it would warrant intermediate scrutiny because of the indirect effects that it might have on the American users or on the U.S. subsidiary. We're not suggesting that if Congress sought to directly regulate and prohibit speech in the United States based on concerns about its content or viewpoint, that's somehow immune from First Amendment scrutiny just because it comes from a foreign source. Obviously, that kind of law is going to trigger strict scrutiny, and I imagine it would be a different constitutional analysis because it's hard to imagine the same profound national security harms that would exist in that scenario as compared to what we have here.
Thank you.
General, isn't the whole point of the divestiture requirement that the content on TikTok would be different if it was owned by a different company? I'm still struggling with your insistence that this is content
I think you mean TikTok,
content
but
based when
so is that
we
what
have
you
that
think?
Kind of circumstance.
I would be more concerned with Nazis on X. How about X and what it's doing? How about the 600 Russian paid assets that we know exist in this country, but somehow we just can't know who they are? So we can't even just make our own decision, never mind shutting them down. Tim Pool, after being named, is more popular than ever, so give me a break. It's certainly not hurting their bottom line
homing in on the
by being
named. Foreign adversary.
So why aren't we naming all of them so that we can make some good fucking decisions in this country?
That the motivation for doing that is because the foreign adversary might influence or change the content. So content matters, doesn't it?
I
know, Max, but there are people when fed a certain amount of information can really change their behaviors, and I've seen it, and so I do agree that there's influence, but I also know that there's other ways to do this.
Some scrutiny, with a heightened scrutiny from the standpoint of our legal tests.
I certainly understand that intuition, and if the court thought that it were prudent to simply try to rule narrowly here and not dictate broader First Amendment principles, we have no problem with the court assuming that heightened scrutiny applies.
GP.
We think the law easily satisfies it. We do think that intermediate scrutiny is a more appropriate framework for this kind of law that's not directly targeting protected speech. But in any event, there's a compelling national security interest here, and the law isn't just narrowly tailored, it's precisely tailored. It's
information is power. It doesn't really matter.
Which is the PRC's involvement and the Chinese government's ability to exercise this control over the corporate entities.
How are we supposed to think about the two different rationales here and how they interact? The data collection rationale, which seems to me at least very strong, the covert content manipulation rationale, as the hypotheticals have illustrated, raise much more challenging questions for you about how far that goes. And if that alone, if you didn't have the data collection piece, you only
why don't
had
they
the
ban Rupert Murdoch?
Manipulation piece.
Why don't they
Mr.
ban
Fisher's point, Mr. Francisco's,
Epoch
that
Times?
Congress would not have enacted this.
They're
just
doing
based
more
on the data
damage
collection
than
rationale
TikTok.
alone. Just your understanding of how the two arguments fit together.
If you want to talk
Sure.
about
and let
undue
me walk through
influence.
our defense of the data protection rationale and why we think it's a full justification for this law, and the court could stop there and then be responsive to their arguments that somehow the interest in preventing covert manipulation somehow taints it. So just on data protection, I think that it should be beyond dispute that, of course, our nation has an enormous interest in keeping the sensitive data out of the hands of our foreign adversary. And it should also be beyond dispute that our foreign adversary has an existing capability through its laws and through the way that these companies are integrated to get its hands on that data. There is no question that Congress was sincerely motivated by that concern. There's a whole lead up to the statute here where the executive branch across 2 different presidential administrations was expressing concerns about the data problems. Congress was extensively briefed on those problems. It passed a companion data protection statute at the same time that was intended to prevent selling data to foreign adversary nations. The statute is shot through with protections that I think are key to this concern about closing off the vulnerability of access to the data. So that's a sincere justification for Congress's desire here to act. We think it's a compelling interest and it's narrowly tailored. Then you get to the question of what to do about the fact that there's also this interest in covert content manipulation. And in the First Amendment context, this court in cases like Heffron has made clear that once you have a justification that satisfies the First Amendment, you don't need to go further and look at other justifications to decide whether they would independently satisfy First Amendment scrutiny. So I think it's not necessary for the court to go on and probe whether it thinks that covert content manipulation itself independently justifies the law.
They
now,
look
my friends say
they look to
that's all fine
movements
and
that will
good,
sow
but they think
discord
covert
among
content
Americans.
manipulation
That's what
is
their
just
little
per
MO
se
is.
illegitimate. And
That's
I
why they're
honestly don't
funding
understand
Freedom
how that
Corner.
argument could carry the day.
Because there was an
Because just
adversary.
imagine if Congress passed a law that said
And they
the
thought they could
PRC
sow
can't
more
covertly
division
manipulate
by
TikTok.
funding that.
Obviously,
So
that law
that's
is not
why.
going to violate any
So
constitutional
actually, the people
principle.
who stood up
It's a
against
laudable
Freedom
goal, I
Corner
think, for
are
our
actually the ones
legislature
who
to
gave
protect
it
us
fuel.
from foreign adversary interference like that. And so there's nothing that's
Not to say they wouldn't have funded it
impermissible
anyway.
about wanting to guard against that risk.
But I'm just
Maybe
saying,
you could say
that
that it
is
sweeps
kind
in
of
too
their
much
MO.
protected speech in the way it's operationalized
Who
in the
knows?
act here.
I don't know enough
But
about
there's
the
certainly
funding
no
of Freedom
fundamental
Corner to know.
taint or anything akin to racial
Nor do I care.
discrimination to call into question whether Congress could seek to vindicate that as one of many interests. So I
But
guess
was
to
he
just kind of
lying?
bring it all
But was he
together,
lying?
What I would say to the court is,
Was he lying,
basically
Tom?
acknowledge that data protection is a compelling interest. That was Congress's real interest. It provides a sufficient basis on its own to uphold this law. The court could say just that and affirm.
And there's that too. There you
How
go.
we do that.
Yeah. Well,
Unless
and
we accept
whatever.
your
Never
argument
mind.
that the post-divestiture provision that stops them from conferring on the algorithm is not a speech impediment, meaning it's very hard for me to say that it's not motivate decide that question, that it is a speech impediment, and one that on its face itself has to be analyzed separately from the data.
So, Justice Sotomayor, let me begin by saying, again, that we do think that an interest in preventing any operational agreement between the U.S. subsidiary and ByteDance, which is the relevant provision you're talking about, is justified by data protection alone. And that includes with respect to cooperation on a content recommendation algorithm, specifically because of the concern that it necessitates data flows between the companies. So I think that as a factual matter, that could justify Congress enacting. But to the extent that you think that actually the prohibition on coordinating with respect to an algorithm reflects some kind of impermissible content-based problem with the statute has a severability clause, and I certainly don't think that it would give the court a basis to invalidate this law or to stop it from operating with respect to all of the provisions that operate to protect data security. At most, it would suggest that little piece of the law has to be on its own separate
He already
from the
did
rest
that,
of how the
Paul.
statute operates.
How does that affect
He got-
whether we would apply?
he got nothing.
Because assuming it's data
He got
protection,
said, yes, you're guilty,
then
and if
I
it
would
was
think that
normal,
strict
you'd
scrutiny
go
would
to jail.
necessarily apply.
But
I
you're
could
not going to go to
understand
jail.
applying intermediate
That's what he did. He
scrutiny.
got away with it.
But how do we do that with respect to
He got
this
away with
part,
it.
the algorithm issue? How do we get to intermediate scrutiny with respect to that?
The way you get to intermediate scrutiny there is to recognize that prohibiting foreign adversary control over the operations of the platform, including with respect to the fundamental backbone of the system, is not based on any protected speech or content based in the relevant sense. I've been thinking of it as akin to something like a piece of software you might have on your phone that would allow the Chinese government to listen in on every American conversation. If Congress wanted to enact a law that patched up that vulnerability and said, you can't use that piece of software or you can't coordinate with Chinese companies with respect to it,
That's not
clearly
sure
we
the
would
legal
recognize that closing
outcome,
off
but
that
it is
capability of China is a
the outcome
laudable
in my
and,
mind.
in fact, compelling government interest. And I think when it comes to the risks that foreign adversary control pose here, it's similar in kind. It's simply trying to prevent access by the Chinese government to the TikTok system writ large, and that includes through the use of the algorithm.
Paulina, you're so kind. Love you. GP, I love you.
Could the president say that we're not going to enforce this law?
I think as a general matter, of course, the president has enforcement discretion.
And would that then adequately, would that be binding? In other words, protect the regulated community so that they could rely on that under due process principles going forward?
That raises a tricky question. So I think there would be
then
a
it's not
strong.
Going to be adequate. Right?
Well, I think there is a strong due process argument that the third-party service providers could invoke if there were enforcement action based on a period of time when the president said the law wouldn't be enforced. The kind of
They're not going to
canonical
take
case.
that risk unless they have the assurance that a presidential statement of non-enforcement is, in fact, something that can be fully relied on, because the risk is too severe otherwise, right?
I think that they might judge that based on this court's precedent in the due process space and
I think I have heard of Chris,
entrapment by
actually.
estoppel. Maybe they
I think
have a
I
sufficient
have.
safeguard here
Yeah,
to allow them to
I'm
continue
aware
to
of
operate.
him.
I would think even before
Time to walk-
a non-enforcement
yeah, walk
policy
the
were announced, of
dog.
course, the
Yeah.
president-elect would
That's
want to
a good
review all
idea.
of the updated national security information that has come in over the last 4 years that undergird Congress's judgment here. But the final thing I would say is that even if you think the third-party providers are simply going to choose not to continue to provide these services because it's too much of a risk to take on.
Wasn't he
Again,
involved
that's
in
not
that little
anything
war
permanent or
game
irrevocable,
documentary
and
that
might be
we
just what
watched?
the PRC
Was he not? I think he was part of that,
To
right?
start taking seriously some of the public reporting about interest in acquiring the company.
At one point, Mr. Francisco
I know, Paul. The
suggested
cat
that
is
what
like
we might
a
want to
horrible
do
performer.
and what he would regard as certainly preferable to a decision affirming on the merits is to issue an injunction pending, I guess, consideration of what we now
He likes to
regard
put his head on the
as,
pillow.
as the cert petition that was filed here. What do you think of that suggestion?
So I think this court doesn't have any basis to enter a temporary injunction unless it thinks petitioners are likely to succeed on the merits of the First Amendment claim. And to be honest, I think that there is no argument to be made that you should find that likely success. This is an act of Congress. This isn't some unilateral action by the executive branch, but it actually was action in parallel between the executive and Congress, where Congress took action to close up a loophole in some of our laws. The executive had tried to force divestiture of TikTok under the Trump administration, but that had gotten tied up in litigation about those authorities. So Congress came in and provided additional authority based on a substantial record, including with respect to the data harm. And I don't see any basis for this court to displace the deadline that Congress set without finding that actually there is a potential First Amendment problem here.
Do you think we have the authority to issue an administrative stay as we have done in other cases, or do you think that the January 20 deadline prohibits us from doing that?
I don't think this court has a formal basis to not issue an administrative stay if it believed that that was necessary to assist in the court's own consideration of the case. And I would obviously defer to the court in whether it has a sufficient time to resolve the case. But we are here ready to submit the case today, and I think it is in the interest of Congress's work and our national security to resolve the case and allow the statute to take effect.
Can I just test to see whether your recollection of what Mr. Francisco said about a warning is consistent with mine? I did not hear him say he can address this.
Itchy knows I'm going to have a fight or
rebuttal,
kiss a fool.
that it would be acceptable to his client if Congress had said there has to be a stark warning on every TikTok, such as, warning, the Communist China is using TikTok to manipulate your thinking and to gather potential blackmail material. Did you hear him say that that would be okay?
I don't think he's made that concession, but even if he had, I don't think that would address the government's national security concerns. And one of the points here is that it's not just data privacy. So even if you could somehow put users on notice that the PRC could obtain their data and they choose to disregard that, it's not a data privacy interest, it's a national security interest. There's a distinct sovereign harm to the United States if our foreign adversary can collect this massive data set about 170 million Americans. And as Justice Kavanaugh touched on, there are a lot of teenagers using TikTok today who might ignore a warning like that and not really care, but they're going to grow up and they might become members of our military. They might become senior government officials. And for the Chinese government to have this vast trove of incredibly sensitive data about them, I think obviously exposes our nation as a whole to a risk of espionage and blackmail.
Thank you.
I did want to touch briefly on the questions about history and tradition
Then why
here,
isn't
because
that
my friends have said
true? I
several
don't know.
times
What?
that the Communications Act of
What data?
1934,
What?
which we think is roughly analogous to the type of restriction that Congress was seeking to enact here, is justified entirely by concerns about scarcity, how you can't have sufficient bandwidth. And I, of course, recognize that scarcity is what created the need for a licensing regime in the first place. But I think it's important to clarify the historical record here that in choosing to limit foreign control of radio stations, of broadcast stations, Congress specifically cited a concern about national security. That is written into the statute. National defense was one of the listed purposes of having that kind of restriction. And so I don't think my friends can succeed in being dismissive of that concern about history and tradition and what it shows about the national security judgments that undergird this law. The one other factual point I wanted to make, to be responsive to a few points that my friends have touched
Everybody's freaking out with
relates to
Elizabeth.
whether TikTok US has the ability to alter this algorithm, whether divestiture is feasible, how ByteDance has manipulated the platform in the past.
I know.
With respect to the
We
algorithm,
need to
I
not
think
be
we're simply
triggered by
talking past
anything.
each
I
other.
understand.
We
Paul
don't
Lang and
dispute that
you
TikTok
like her
US might
voice. It's
engage
fine.
in some functions
To
in the
each his
United
own,
States
really.
to customize
But
the
I also
algorithm for a U.S.
understand.
audience. The thing we're worried about is happening long before that over in China, where ByteDance is developing the source code, creating the basic backbone and functioning of the system, and is then blasting out the algorithm for use by the various subsidiaries in their home country. So we're not seeking to regulate any activity that TikTok US is engaged in here. Instead, what Congress is doing is trying to close off the vulnerability
It's making
of
me
PRC
anxious.
access
It's
abroad.
true. So it
With
is a
respect
to
the
each his own
feasibility of
situation.
divestiture, my friends have said it would have been impossible to do this within 270 days. At the outset, obviously, there's no inherent
This is why
impediment
it's hard to
divesting
be a
social
lawyer,
media
because I don't know.
company.
I
We
couldn't.
just saw
I don't know if
Elon
I'd
Musk
be
buy X or
professional
Twitter
enough to
in
argue
about 6
something I
months
may
from
not
offer
agree
to
with,
completion.
and I think you
And
have to
even
be
with respect
professional
to this
enough to do
particular
that.
company, I think my friends are not well positioned
I like
to
her.
complain
I
about
like
the
her
timeline
mind. I
because
actually
they've been
think she's
on
really
notice
smart.
since 2020 that unless they could
I think she's
satisfy
really
the
good.
federal government's national security concerns, divestiture might be required. But in any event, I don't think that the court should fault Congress
You
for
didn't get
trying
in
to
trouble.
balance
Stop
competing
it.
interests here in making sure that there was a period for compliance.
Hey man,
and
this
trying
is
to
a free
preserve
speech
access to the
channel,
platform for
okay, man?
Americans
It's a
while
free
taking
speech
steps to
channel,
safeguard against the risk
okay?
to national security. Finally, with respect to the question of whether ByteDance has taken action on the PRC's demands,
Her arguments during
there is
immunity, you
evidence in the
think, or-
record that Congress consulted to demonstrate that outside of China, ByteDance has taken action to misappropriate data at the PRC's request. That included efforts to track dissidents in Hong Kong, protesters there, to track Uyghurs in China itself. We know that ByteDance
I
has
love that all of a
misappropriated
sudden
US
we
data
care
with
about the
respect to
Uyghurs.
surveilling of U.S. journalists. And there was evidence in the record reinforcing the conclusion that ByteDance has been asked by the PRC to undertake efforts to censor content and manipulate the platform at the behest of the Chinese government. So I don't think there is a factual basis to dispute the record that Congress had before it. If the court has no further questions.
It's a free speech channel. Freedom.
General,
1776.
If I understood correctly, under
Don't read to me.
President-elect's first term, he passed an executive order requiring divestiture, correct?
That's right.
And this, that was
Oh, you just
challenged in court and stayed as a result,
articulation. That's it. Okay,
of
I
him
get it.
exceeding his executive power to
You
do
need
that.
people to enunciate.
But this bill followed a bipartisan investigation.
I
correct?
love to walk on the beach.
I am a little
I
concerned
love
that a
rainstorms
suggestion
and I
that
love
the president-elect or
enunciation.
anyone else should not enforce the law when
My
a law
turn-ons
is in
are-
effect and has prohibited a certain action that a company would choose to
She actually just
ignore
had a big Monster
enforcement
energy
on
drink.
any
Okay, you guys, come on,
assurance
calm
other than
down.
the change in that law. But putting that aside,
On the 19th, if it doesn't shut down, there is a violation of law, correct?
Yes.
And whatever the new president does doesn't change that reality.
I sound like that too when I have a couple monsters in me.
How long is the statute of limitations in effect? Assuming that they violated it that day and later continue to violate it. But how long does the statute of limitations exist for a civil violation of the suit?
It would be a 5-year statute of limitations.
I just subscribed to New Yorker for the tote bag.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice, for points, all of which go to why we think this law would fail, whether you applied intermediate scrutiny or strict scrutiny. I'd like to begin with the least restrictive alternative, simply prohibiting TikTok Incorporated from disseminating any of the sensitive user data to anyone, including ByteDance, under the threat of massive penalties. That is definitely a less restrictive alternative.
I wanted to do a smart signaling.
Now, my friend pointed to the NSA negotiations.
I'm a fancy girl
the sensitive
signaling.
user data that we're talking about and that were of concern in the NSA negotiations,
of course I read the long articles,
are not the type of technical data that she's talking about. The NSA did allow certain types of non-sensitive technical data to go back and forth, but that wasn't anybody's concern. And as we say in page 23 of our briefs, they simply cut off the negotiations without
God,
ever
it's such a
raising
good
those
room,
concerns.
Paulina. Every
But to be
single one
clear,
of you is
if that's a
fucking
concern,
hilarious.
sweep that into the ban too. Put in that non-sensitive technical data into the ban too. We'll deal with that. It's a lot better than simply being forced to shut down. So that is most definitely a less
Good point.
restrictive
You
alternative
come bring a
that
glass
would
of
address
water,
data
but
security.
don't show your cat.
We talked about the under-inclusiveness and Temu and Shein, the two large e-commerce
And don't
sites.
put
Justice Kagan, you might have seen
no,
Temu
don't
during
get-
the Super Bowl that was heavily advertised. It's one of the most popular e-commerce applications in the United States. It's got 70 million users. Justice Sotomayor, you were asking what they collect. This is from Joint Appendix 339 to 343, the U.S.-China Economic and Security Commission Review Report. Shein relies on tracking and analyzing user data, draws on customer data and search history with the assistance of artificial intelligence algorithms. It requests users share their data and activity from other apps, including social media. So they apparently go into your social media apps and suck up
don't do this
all of the
because I will
information.
go all the
Because
way
they're
there and I
e-commerce
don't want
apps,
to
they
do
take
it.
names, addresses, and credit card information. If you look at the privacy
too
policies
early.
on their website, they collect location data. It looks like they might even collect at
I think
some
I'm just
level
losing my
GPS
mind.
location data. So they collect massive amounts of data. Point 3.
I do if
their
somebody
mere
else makes it for
covertness
me. Why
argument
is that
makes no
different?
sense for the reasons that the
Ask
court
me how I
explored.
know.
If mere covertness were the issue, a disclosure would make perfect sense. Yet they're not concerned about mere covertness. They're concerned, as my friend suggested, with
Jump
getting
to
Americans
recipe.
to argue with each other. Well, as far as I can tell, that's what news organizations do in this country every single day. That's what we call editorial content. That's what we call content itself. And so it's trained directly on the content.
Why is
But
that
even
funny?
if you
I
thought
don't
somehow
know.
that the
I
mere
don't know.
covertness were the issue, that definitely could be addressed through a risk
Ooh,
disclosure.
that sounds
So
good. It's
the,
like a little
data
gazpacho.
sharing
I
ban,
love it.
the risk disclosure, those are obvious, less restrictive alternatives. And had the government considered them and rejected them, we would be in a different position. But if you look at this record, those are two less restrictive alternatives that the government did not address at all. Whether you apply strict scrutiny or intermediate scrutiny, that is fatal because under both standards, restricting speech has to be the last resort, not the first one. And when
I
you
would
fail
try
to
it.
consider
I mean, I
less
love
restrictive
gazpacho.
alternatives, you fail under either standard. My final
This is
substantive
like half
point is
gazpacho.
we
Sounds
absolutely
really
think
good.
this
What kind of
court
sweetener?
has the authority to enter an
Could
administrative
you use like agave
stay.
or something?
I didn't understand my friend to
does it have to
disagree
be a
with
powder?
that. We think that given the enormity of this decision, given the complexity of this case, it would make perfect sense for this court to enter an administrative stay. I also think you could enter a preliminary injunction. Yes, likelihood of success is one standard, but you don't have to determine ultimate success. And as you do in
Please,
other
you
related
guys, you're
contexts,
really
like with
stop
respect
it.
to
You're really
stays,
begging for
you
the
often
jokes,
make
and
clear
I
that you are
just
not
I can't do that.
addressing the merits of the case.
It's too
I think
early.
you could do that here. The bottom line, Your Honor, is this case ultimately boils down to speech. What we're talking about is ideas.
I bet you she
and my
does.
friends on the other side, when you cut through
Really,
everything
Val?
else,
You have a
are
gazpacho
ultimately
video on your
worried
channel,
that
can't be
the
modified to
ideas
taste?
that
I love
appear
that.
on the TikTok
It does sound
platform
like agua
could, in
fresca.
the
Oh,
future,
interesting.
somehow manipulate
But,
Americans, could somehow persuade them, could somehow
Val in a
get
Van
them to think something
has
that
a
they
gazpacho
ought
video. I'm
not
going to find
be
it.
thinking. Well, that whole
Hold on.
notion is at war with the First Amendment. If the First
Hold
Amendment
on, let
means
me find
anything, it means
it.
that the government
Let me find
cannot
it.
restrict
Let me
speech
find it.
in order to protect us from speech. That's precisely what this law does from beginning to end, whether you look at its text, whether you look at the government's justifications in its brief, where they talk about being worried about speech criticizing our leaders or undermining democracy. It's what you see in the House report, which drains specifically on the dangers of misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. And it's what you see in this legislative record writ large, which is saturated with objections to TikTok's existing content. We ask that you reverse the court below. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. The case is submitted.
The Honorable Court is
Woo!
now adjourned until Monday
Hell
next
yeah.
at 10 o'clock.
Oh, I just spoke over that. So now I don't know. Hold on. I gotta end that. Hold on. I'm going to do gazpacho, easy gazpacho soup, Val. A short and a long. Yeah, don't at Val ever. If anyone comes for Val, I will come for you twofold. Okay? Don't even come for my beautiful, beautiful sister Val. Ever. I mean, it's on like Donkey Kong if you do. No, I just want to. Val's wonderful, and we love her so much. I'm gonna put the link in for the long video, which will lead you. You must subscribe. I mean, why not? Why are you not? Come on now. Here we go. Yeah, come for the gazpacho recipe. Val's gazpacho. But then I want to show the short, if that's okay, Val. Is that okay? I know. We're learning together. We're learning YouTube together, Val and I. So don't ever come for us. Because we're very amazing. We're very brave and amazing. Okay, here we go. Let me see where. Oh, whoops. Wait. Where to go? Where to go? Where to go? Where to go? Here we go. Stop it. Stop it. Here we go. Boop. All right. This is beautiful, Val. Now let's watch the short.
Welcome to my easy gazpacho soup video. Enjoy. Okay, you're basically looking at the ingredients for a really quick, really delicious gazpacho soup. We chilled our soup. I'm going to make a bowl for myself and a package for my neighbor.
This is fucking amazing, Val. Yeah, I know. That's what happens. And you know what? Every single thing you create is beautiful. This is fucking amazing, Val. I'm watching it again.
Welcome to my easy gazpacho soup video. Enjoy. Okay, you're basically looking at the ingredients for a really quick, really delicious gazpacho soup. We chilled our soup. I'm going to make a bowl for myself and a package for my neighbor. Bon appetit.
That is so good. Yeah, use up your TikTok cash, Bunny. That's right. You think you got 9 days. You never know. Val, that was fucking awesome. I am so proud of you. I am so proud of you. Oh my gosh. Yes, damn girl. Are you kidding me? That was amazing for an early video. My God, that's not an early video. That's like really good editing. I love it. Well, okay. The link to the longer video of that same recipe is in the chat. So please subscribe to Val. She's an amazing person, and I've known her for a few years now. We started on Twitter together as friends. So I just really appreciate her bravery. She's like a role model. So I love you, Val. You're a really good soul. You've got a beautiful, beautiful soul. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Aw, it really does look delicious. Oh, yum. And I just love the idea that you can put different things. The creep tapes. No, Bunny, I haven't watched that. Oh, gosh. That sounds crazy. Do I want to know, Bunny? Do I want to know? Do I want to know what it has, what it's talking about? Is that something I want to know? Do we not have enough creeps in our lives? No, I'm just kidding. No, apparently we don't. Oh my God. Let me see what I've got here. Boop, boop, boop. Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. It's found footage style. Oh my God, I love that shit. Are you kidding me, Bunny? It's not, have you seen Marble Hornets? Have you seen the Marble Hornet series on, sped up, baby. Have you seen the Marble Hornet series on YouTube? Have you ever seen that? There's 2 creep films before this series. Oh wait, is the Creep the one where the guy is the creep in it? Is that the one? Oh, I love that. Oh, Bunny, I love that stuff. I could have a whole show talking about horror movies and found footage and independent films and all that. Oh, fuck yeah. Well, I don't know if the Creep is the same movie I'm thinking of, but I think that was also found footage. I think he goes to doesn't he go? Yes, Mark Duplass. Doesn't he go to someone's house like as he's like an actor auditioning for something, and then he ends up being a killer or something? Oops, sorry, I probably spoiled it. Real footage turned into a movie. Yeah, that's what I mean. Wink, wink. Oh my God, I'm gonna check that out. I did not know the Creep tapes. I gotta definitely. Yes, he hires people to film him. Yes. God, that's right. Oh, that movie freaked me the fuck out. I didn't know there was others. Okay, I'm going to find them. I'm seeking them out. It's official. I just love found footage. I know, it is funny. Yeah, I watched the whole goddamn thing. I didn't turn it off. Did you? Yay, 67 subscribers. Let's get Val up there, man. She needs to go to the moon and back. Oh, thank you so much, Bunny, because I love a good recommendation. I feel like I've almost watched every found footage goofy movie. Oh, we could definitely watch those. I know some people aren't horror fans, but we could definitely do a Discord of these found footage. Oh, fuck yeah, we could. I mean, if people are up for it. Some of it's pretty gory, but I don't know. Yeah, I will definitely check it out. Thanks, Bunny. Thank you. So nice to see you. It's nice to see you in the chat. Old friend. An old friend. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and skedaddle this morning. Been in meetings the whole time. Pepper! God damn, I love you so much. Pepper Saltina. Ooh, 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 ooh. Yes, Val, I understand that. And I can especially understand Val in a van that I can't watch certain movies after dark. Oh, Lee, you're not. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, Some of them are good. It's like Blair Witch is found footage, where it pretending that, it's footage that's found from people. Like, I like the Paranormal Activity ones. I really love those. That's my jam. My jam is like ghosts and shit like that. I'm not really into the gore or the serial killer type of stuff. Although I do love horror, so I'll watch anything, really. Those W2 Friday. Oh, I know. I love Cloverfield. Fuck. Cloverfield is so amazing. I know, but still, I love Cloverfield. Oh my God, that's a great movie. Great movie. Fuck, man. Really good movie. Monster is a really good found footage film. It's lesser known, I think, but really, The Happening, that's a freaky movie. Yeah, Stephen King. Oh my God, The Stand. Oh, that scared the hell out of me. But I love a good ghost story. I'm really into ghost stories. I like Insidious, or whatever is it, Insidious, or like The Conjuring, all those series. I love that. I love fucking The Final Destination series. I fucking love that. I love Thai horror. Horror films made in Thailand they have some of the most amazing horror films from Thailand in the fucking planet. Korean horror, I love Korean horror films. Japanese horror, I love actually the Russian horror, there's a bunch of, I'll take anybody's horror movies. No, Monster, there is a movie, Monster, about that female serial killer. Monster was like there's like these monsters that have come down to Earth, and the United States has built a huge wall. And so you have to, they're trying to get this daughter of a diplomat out of South America and into America clandestinely, I guess. But there's monsters all around. It's very good. It's a very serious film, but it's a true monster film. But it's a little slow moving, and it's very scary. And it's all that. Yes, I know. Bunny, I love The Nun. Fuck yeah, I'm all over it. Exorcist, all over it. Love it. Love it. Omen, love it. Yeah, let's do it. We'll do some horror weekends or something like that. Yeah, wonder where Lummox got the wall idea. Oh, I know. And vampires, werewolves. Yeah, bring it. Bring it, bring it, bring it, bring it. Bring it, bring it, bring it, bring it. The Ring. Psh, girl, come on now. The Grudge. Bring it. Come on. Shudder. One Last Call. Come on. Bring it. Bring it. I do like Van Helsing too. Yes. I love Dracula with Gary Oldman is just fucking like one of the most sexy movies I've ever seen in my life. Yes, definitely send ideas. Definitely share ideas for movies. Oh, What We Do in the Shadows, amazing. Amazing. Bobo's a huge fan of that. Oh, I adore Gary Oldman. Yeah. Anyways. Oh, fun. How fun. Well, this has been a funner, well, not that part, but the Friday, Friday's good. It's nice to have Friday and have a fun conversation on a Friday. Oh, Gary Oldman in that Spy, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, or whatever the fuck it is. That was pretty good. Yeah. The other thing is that Bobo recommended shit. What did she recommend? Mad Max Furiosa. She watched that. She said that was a real good time. And I was like, wow, okay. So apparently Bobo really liked Mad Max Furiosa. So in case you're looking for anyone's opinion on that movie, I don't know if you are or not. But anyway, for what it's worth, I guess. Yeah, I know. It's hard. It's hard to watch remakes sometimes. Sometimes they're back. The Frank Langella Dracula, amazing. Hot. Hot. Yeah, apparently it's really good. I know. Even though you've been biffed, GP, you still had a good time. I'm glad to hear that. We did laugh a lot today, which was very good. And that's my goal, right? Huh. Laugh every day, at least once. Oh, yeah, without Mel Gibson. No Mel Gibson. I do like Signs, too, yeah. We just watched the new M. Night Shyamalan movie, which was okay. It was a little much, but it was okay. I don't know. I think he's not put out the best movies of his work. Oh, Rollerball. I love all those. Oh my God, we can't. Running Man, forget it. We are going to do next weekend, next Friday for movies, we're going to do Escape from LA and Escape from New York, or whichever order they go in. I can't remember. I think it's Escape from New York and then Escape from LA, right? Is that right? I do. Exactly, Carla. Laughs a lot with Lolo. But yeah, we'll have those two. We'll have those two movies next week because I do love those movies. I'm sorry. I love me some Snake. Anyway, all right. Have a great Friday. Hopefully I'll see you tonight for our two movies. Time Bandits is first, and then we'll have Skidoo from 1968. Whoop, whoop. And yeah, everyone have a wonderful day. Thanks for stopping in, Bunny. Sure appreciate seeing you. And have a great weekend. If I don't see you, tomorrow also is the Lounge Spaced Out Trivia from the Smoky Hills of Los Angeles. I know subtitles are so hard because some people do watch on a phone, and that's the only reason I tried to stay away from subtitled movies. So it's tough. But anyway, we'll find a way. Life finds a way. Ciao, Bella. All right. Thank you all very much for coming. Good night, GP. Love you so much. All right. Oh, I got to see Nosferatu too. That's right. Oh, so many movies. All right. Bye, guys.